All right, let's get it. Drive time Monday afternoon, 7 minutes past the hour, 2 o'clock. It's hot. Summer's here. June is flexing. It's about 92 degrees and sunny here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Happy Monday to you. Spence Checketts behind the mic. That's Porter Larson producing the program today. Behind the glass, booking the show with some really good guests, and we've got a lot to do. Kind of a random, really cool sports weekend with a ton to get to. Obviously, we'll do some NBA Finals. We'll talk OKC, Indiana, a unbelievable tennis match at Roland Garros in the French Open Final. A golf tournament up north with our friends to the north, the RBC Canadian Challenge that went to 4 different extra holes to get a winner there. And then, obviously, the battle for Lord Stanley's Cup. Both the Stanley Cup Finals and the NBA Finals find themselves tied at 1 game apiece. So, a lot to do, a lot to get to. We are high speed ahead to the NBA draft of local interest and, of course, the NHL draft as well, where the Utah Jazz will draft number 5 and the Utah Mammoth will draft number 4. At least those are the picks they have now. We'll see if any movement is made prior to the draft or on draft night. I'll tell you, everyone around pro basketball believes that we are in for a summer of chaos. And Bill Simmons, if you listen to Bill or if you respect his takes or his connections, on his podcast yesterday said he has been told that the Jazz are actively taking phone calls regarding Lowry Markkanen. So take that for what it's worth. I don't feel like there's anybody on that roster that's untouchable. So we'll get into the latest NBA rumors and storylines. What might the Utah Jazz prior to draft night? What might they do during the offseason? With the number 5 pick and, of course, a bevy of assets and clean books really starting next year, the Jazz have a lot of optionality. That's the buzzword in roster construction and pro sports these days. So we'll get to all that stuff on the program today and get you ready for a busy week ahead. We'll start things off with our old buddy Rob Perez, Worldwide Wob, as he's known on the interwebs. Very famous NBA personality, and a friend of the program who's joined us from time to time. We'll talk some Jazz basketball. We'll talk some NBA draft. And, of course, we'll talk NBA Finals, where Oklahoma City was able to answer last night with a dominant performance. We're going to get into it on the show. If you are new to the Thunder because you haven't watched basketball much this year, and now it's the NBA Finals, that is what they've been doing more or less all year long. So we'll get with Rob today and get his takeaways of Game 2 and how he thinks the rest of the series will play out. Going to bring in Eddie Gill. Shout out to my old friend Carl Arkey. Carl reached out and told me that Eddie Gill is now a broadcaster on the Indiana Pacers radio side of things. Eddie was an incredible basketball player here locally. Really good college player up at Weber. Played professionally. I scouted Eddie Gill for the New York Knicks when he was at Weber. I don't think I've seen him since then. So I'm excited to catch up with Eddie today. We'll talk some NBA Finals. Our buddy Richard Smith, who spent 40 years with the Utah Jazz, joins us live in studio for an entire hour today. And then a historic day on Friday that we're going to get into as the House v. NCAA settlement has finally been pushed across the line. It took a lot longer than a lot of people were expecting. I've done a bunch of reading and listening and trying to break this thing down. There was a Zoom call held by the conference commissioners, including Brett Yormark of the Big 12, where they answered some questions. There's still a lot of ambiguity, but this is at least a step in the right direction where hopefully we can get a little clarity on what college athletics will look like moving forward. So Ted Robinson, our old buddy from the Pac-12 Network, is going to stop by today. Ted also famously has called a tremendous amount of tennis matches throughout his career, so I wanted to talk to Ted about what we saw between Sinner and Alcaraz over at Roland Garros, which was a historic tennis match, one of the longest Grand Slam finals of all time. 5 sets, tiebreaker that just was a heavyweight fight back and forth. So we'll get with Ted on that stuff today. We've got our buddy Rob Perez, Eddie Gill, Richard Smith, Ted Robinson, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners. Happy Monday to you. And that guy, Porter Larson. How does it feel to still be a young person where even if you have an aggressively active weekend, you don't feel tired all day on Monday? What's that like?
I mean, I still get it. I'm not over the hill. I'm 30, though.
30 years old.
So I'm over some hill. Somebody's hill.
Over the smallest of hills is what you are, young man.
No, it feels good. It feels good.
Should feel good.
The thing is, I am still healthy enough where the thing is, if I don't do that over the weekend, right? If I like sit around all weekend, maybe go out and drink a little bit, that's when I feel bad. If I get out and move and kind of get my ass kicked by the sun, I feel kind of good all week.
All right.
So that's hoping to stay that way for a while, I guess.
Enjoy your youth. How did you digest Game 2 of the championship series in pro basketball?
A little bit how I thought it would go, just in the way OKC responded, right? They just played a much cleaner basketball game. It really is as simple as SGA settling down and being the MVP that we have seen throughout the majority of this season. And if he is that player, if the chaos, the helter-skelter of the Pacers backcourt doesn't bother him enough, I don't think we see real close series on the remainder of it. So that's kind of the story of Game 2, and I think the story of the rest of the series. If SGA can remain that just calm, cool facilitator and getting to the rack and knocking down his jumpers, there's really no way to stop him. There's no counter for the Pacers, and probably decides the series like it did Game 2.
Yeah, and Halliburton can't wait 3.5 quarters to show up.
But
you
can get away with that so many times during this postseason. Once it's NBA Finals time, Spence, you maybe get one of those.
Yeah, got to show up, man. All right, Live Night Events presents the 2025 Granary Live Concert Series, powered by Nightingale College and Murdoch Hyundai, Utah's #1 Hyundai dealer. Experience outdoor concerts in the heart of downtown Salt Lake's Granary District. You can get more information online at ESPN700sports.com. Our first guest today, Rob Perez, to talk some NBA. Our buddy Worldwide Wob on the interwebs, as he's known. But before we get to Rob, courtesy of our good friends, your good friends too at Prize Picks, it is time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash with millions of members. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. There's only one series left in the playoffs, and the championship is officially on the line. That means time is running out for you to put your final takes to the test on Prize Picks, the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. Download that Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700. And when you play your first $5 lineup, they're just going to hook you up with $50. You do not even have to win your $5 lineup. The $50 is on the house. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use that promo code ESPN700 at checkout. You're going to get $50. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. All right, NBA Finals Game 2. We'll get to the House v. NCAA settlement. We'll talk some college football, some off-season college athletics coming up in a bit. But the NBA Finals continue to roll along. Last night in Oklahoma City, it's wild. I wonder if Jazz fans have the same type of experience whenever I watch a game that's being played in Oklahoma City where there's a lot on the line. It feels a lot like it does when the Jazz are good and it's spring basketball in Salt Lake. That crowd is awesome. That building was super, super loud and helpful sustaining Oklahoma City because they actually got off to another pretty slow start. So this entire season, as I referenced during the opener, if you're not watching NBA basketball throughout the course of the regular season, first of all, I totally understand because so many players just simply don't play, as we've talked about on the show. So if you're a basketball fan that more or less waits until the spring to kind of dig in, you might not necessarily be all that familiar with who Oklahoma City is. And if you watch them for the first time last night, that's who they've been all year. Like, honestly, it really wasn't a very entertaining game. I thought Game 1 was a lot more entertaining with the way Indiana was able to flip the script. Last night, it was just Oklahoma City doing what they've done to teams all year long, specifically at home. And it starts and ends with their main cog. And, of course, that's Shea, who has elevated his game to this point where he just gets it. And he understands exactly what he has to do to control every part of the game offensively. And it really is like watching a savant work, with the way he's been able to grow into who he is as a ball-dominant offensive initiator, decision-maker, the main cog on the best team in pro basketball. As I've said before, I still think Nikola Jokic is the best player in the world, but SGA was certainly a deserving MVP this year, because it wasn't just that Oklahoma City won 68 games, which is a dumb amount of games to win. I mean, that in and of itself indicates that you're not just elite, you're historically special. They beat teams all year by an average of 13 points. Their net was 12.9. And nobody could really do much against them at home at all. They were 35-6 at home. It doesn't matter where they play. They were 32-8 on the road. But the conversation entering the postseason surrounding the Thunder is simply, are they ready for this stage? Because as a group, they have not had this deep playoff run where they have made it to a Western Conference final or a couple of them. You know, usually the rite of passage thing in pro basketball is very real. And we've seen it here with John and Carl, the old school Jazz in the 90s, knocking on the door for years before they actually were able to make an NBA Finals. And they did it twice. But it's not usually something that happens to a team that still is very young. In Oklahoma City, I mean, the bad news, if you're an NBA fan and if you like other teams other than the Thunder, is OKC is still so young. And they have so many assets at their disposal to add to the group once they have to make some decisions about salary, which they will have to do. Okay, with the way this CBA is formulated, it is so punitive when you get to a certain point of the economics that you just simply can't keep a super team together the way that you used to. And that is by design, by the way. That is on purpose, because Adam Silver has been front-facing about his desire for parity in pro basketball. But when you watch what they do when they're clicking like that, when Shea is just dominating every portion of the game, which is what he did, you kind of start to understand why they've been so impossible for so many teams this year and why they're probably going to win the World Championship this year and will probably have something to say about the World Championship, the NBA Championship for the next 4 or 5 years, if not longer, when you look at what Sam Presti has put together. I mean, their oldest player is Alex Caruso, who's 31. And, you know, Alex Caruso is a solid role player coming off the bench. He had a great game last night. But if you just look at it, Lou Dort is 26 years old. Shea is 26. Hartenstein is 27. Chet is 23. Even a guy like Isaiah Joe, who gives him minutes, 25 years old. Cason Wallace is 21. Aaron Wiggins, who had a really nice game last night, knocked down some three-point shots, is 26. Jalen Williams is 24. The other Jalen Williams is 22. And Kendrick Williams just turned 30. I mean, this is a roster that has 2 rotational pieces that are over the age of 26, and the rest of them are 26 and younger, and all under contract for now. So, you know, Rick Carlisle talked about this after the game. When Shea is just doing that, first of all, it's impossible. But when you're able to get ancillary benefits from some of your bit pieces who can step in and knock down shots the way that they were able to get last night. I mean, again, ultimately, when it comes to Alex Caruso, he is most well known, and deservedly so, of being a 6'5", 6'6" guard that can guard 3 or 4 positions, right? He's really hard to screen. He's really hard to disrupt. But when he's knocking down shots like that, like Aaron Wiggins went 5 of 8 from 3. Caruso goes 4 of 8 from 3. They become the second bench duo to make 4 3-point shots or more in NBA Finals history. And that's $20 in your back pocket of your jeans when you're doing the laundry. Because as Carlisle talked about after the game, you can just kind of mark down 34 points for Shea. That's the 9th straight 30-plus point game Shea has had in the playoffs at home. That is tied for the NBA record with Wilt Chamberlain. Over the first 2 games of the series, Shea has 72 points. It's the most all time. He just passed Allen Iverson and Michael Jordan. And he's not really known as just like this pure scorer because he's such a dominant force with everything he can do. He's an excellent decision maker. He can rebound because he's a big guard. And while he's not Lou Dort on defense, he's still good enough where you can't hunt him. Now, Indiana's trying, but it's like an exercise in futility because ultimately OKC is so versatile and very defensively that they can switch up their looks, they can hedge, they can switch, and then like they're handing Halliburton off to either Jalen, Lou Dort, Cason Wallace, or Shea, and then Caruso comes off the bench, and all of them get a crack at Halliburton. Now, ultimately, I don't want to make this an anti-Halliburton take here, but he's got to show up prior to the fourth quarter. He had 5 points through the first, 38 minutes of basketball, and then started to get it going in the fourth, but it was a 20-point game. And, yes, I know Indiana has come back a lot during the postseason, but against this OKC team, you have to be frosty from jump, and you cannot rely on your ability to come back over and over and over again, even though you've done it 5 times, which is incredibly impressive. And Rick Carlisle deserves a ton of credit for bringing this Indiana team to the finals when nobody saw it coming. And I don't want to hear it. Like, nobody saw this coming. Now, January, Indiana started to flip the script a little bit. And the 2 best records in the NBA since January, ironically enough, belong to Oklahoma City and the Indiana Pacers. But the Pacers started the season off 10-15. They were like a 29-1 bet to come out of the Eastern Conference. So this, again, I'll use the analogy of found money. If you're Indiana, like, it's gravy, man. Yeah, you want to go win the championship. You want to go get that chip because you're in the finals. But we all thought, I mean, anybody who works in basketball, covers basketball, I would have put a tremendous amount of money on Celtics OKC right from day one of the season and would have not have hedged that bet up until the start of the postseason. Of course, Tatum's injury changes it. The Knicks were able to find a way to make Boston uncomfortable, and they win that series. But Indiana has crashed this party, but Oklahoma City is the host, and they've been here, and they've been waiting, and they're ready. So any of the conversation about, okay, young group, they haven't had a long playoff run, are they really ready for this stage? They're here. And they are ready, and I think they're going to win the World Championship. I picked them in 5. It feels more like a 6-game series. I think they'll go back to Indiana at Gainsbridge Fieldhouse, another raucous arena and a great crowd. And I think the Pacers probably get one at home. I think we probably come back to OKC, deadlocked at 2 games apiece. And I think Oklahoma City eventually finds a way to get it done, probably in 6. Like I said, I picked them in 5. I don't know that I feel like that's the play at this point. But bringing it back around before we catch a break, I mean, what I always try to do here are analyze these games and watch these teams through the prism of where the Utah Jazz are at and this project that now Austin Ainge is the leader of to try to take this on. And I am serious. As I'm watching Oklahoma City play, when Mark Daigneault is kind of going deep into his rotation, playing at Kendrick Williams or playing in Aaron Wiggins, obviously Caruso's their 6th man. He plays every night. I don't know how many Jazz players even make this roster, let alone play in the rotation. It's probably Lowry and Walker, right? But does Walker play over Hartenstein? Probably not. Does he play over Chet? Definitely not. Like, Walker Kessler would be like the 9th man on this team, and Lauri Markkanen wouldn't start for them. Keontae George and Isaiah Collier don't even make this roster, right? And so, obviously, the Jazz are in a different place. Because they're in the beginning, even though it's the 4th year, I'm not buying any of their whole, like, hey, we've been tearing it down, and now the rebuild, like, stop. That's so insulting. Even though it is the 4th year coming up, the Jazz are still in the beginning of a long, painful process to hopefully find a way to stack good decisions, like Austin said last week, to cultivate talent on a roster to be able to hang with a team like this. But as we're presently constituted, the gap between an Oklahoma City and a Utah Jazz, it's the Grand Canyon. It could not be bigger, right? And so as I'm trying to analyze this stuff and kind of analyze where the Jazz are at and what they have to do to get back to respectability, it's just an interesting thing to think about how many Jazz players would even make the team, let alone be in the rotation. NBA draft a couple weeks away. We'll have great draft night coverage for you on June the 25th. Round 2 will be the next day on the 26th. We'll have you covered there as well. All right, we'll catch our first break of a Monday edition of the show. We'll do more basketball coming up with Rob Perez. We will get to the House v. NCAA settlement. We're going to do some college football and some college athletics on the show. Weber State legend and current radio personality from the Indiana Pacer broadcast is Eddie Gill. He'll stop by. Smitty's live in studio, then Uncle Ted Robinson later on. A jam-packed, busy Monday show, and it's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. been a minute, but good friend of the show, Rob Perez, back on the program on a Monday. Rob, happy Monday, man. How you doing?
Got a couple more gray hairs on my head since the last time we spoke. But other than that, the sun rose in the east and it's set in the west.
There you go.
So can't complain.
And my beard is much wider than it was last time you and I spoke. So you and I, odd bedfellows there. Rob, I wanted to start with the situation in New York, where for the first time in a number of different years, the Knicks are relevant and good and fun, and they also need a new head coach. Your response and reaction to the news when you heard it that they were letting Tom Thibodeau go, and I'm just wondering who you think is going to get that gig.
Yeah, so initial thoughts, I was very neutral, which is strange for me considering I'm a Knicks fan and being old enough to experience the highs and the lows and everything in between. This is not something new where the governor of the team, James Dolan, is sitting in on exit interviews with the head of basketball operations, who is now Leon Rose. In the past, it could have been a Donnie Walsh. It could have been Phil Jackson, someone like that. But Dolan reappearing certainly brings up memories of that time. But the Knicks have moved on past that, right? I mean, you brought it up yourself. This team is fun. They are relevant. They are moving in a direction that I haven't seen since I was a child. And a lot of that building up was due to Tom Thibodeau. I mean, this team went from complete irrelevancy, where the entire roster was built on power forwards who were on 1+1 contracts, meaning under contract plus a team option that second year. Taj Gibson and Marcus Morris and all these names, right? And they've evolved into this over 4 or 5 year span. And you got to give Tom Thibodeau most of the credit there, as he's been at the helm coaching these guys through thick and thin. And the New York Knicks have been a roller coaster of emotion. They go on losing streaks. They respond with a 7-game winning streak. Now there's been this resemblance of consistency and taking that step forward. So for all of those reasons, I'm certainly appreciative of what Tom Thibodeau accomplished in New York. There's a comma but coming, a comma, however, ... However, I do certainly believe that what's holding back the Knicks from taking what's now the next step to the NBA Finals is the ability to deploy and develop a roster that is more than 7-8 deep. And if we have learned anything from Tom Thibodeau these years, it's that he is always going to go down in Tom Thibodeau's way, right? He's going to play his 7 to 8 trusted guys, and only out of necessity, not necessarily preference, will he go to the DeLon Wrights and the Landry Shamits, of whom played pretty dang decently in that conference finals. But you're going to need a lot more than that to beat these Pacers. So maybe it was the belief from Knicks ownership and the executive level that we're very thankful for you getting us here, but for us to become this publicly traded company, we got to go with a different CEO, right? That's the only way the board is going to approve this IPO price, is if there's someone else at the helm who can take what's there and push them even further. And I think the second part of your question was, who's next? Got me. I mean, they're trying to seek permission to speak with Jason Kidd from Dallas, and you can put the pieces together on that one, what that would mean potentially for the roster as well.
Yeah, to me, Rob, that also indicates they did not have a contingency in place. Like, if you're going to fire a coach who just took you to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in 25 years and won you 50 ball games back-to-back years for the first time since 94, 95, you better know what you're doing next. And I honestly don't think that they do.
Yeah, I really did expect to hear the news of someone getting the Knicks job within 48 hours, because you're only firing Tom Thibodeau if you have something lined up that's going to help you take that next step. And it's now been a lot more than 48 hours. So people were thinking, is Michael Malone just, being part of that CAA mafia with Leon Rose and Worldwide West? Is he next up, being the New Yorker? And he also has proven championship success in managing a veteran-laden team. But he's not the head coach of the Knicks yet. You would figure maybe Jay Wright would have been the guy because of his connection to those national champion Villanova Wildcats and how much those guys liked playing for him. But supposedly he has denied that as well. And the Jason Kidd thing has some serious equity with me, because I would certainly understand why he wants to leave Dallas with all the turnover and overhaul that's been going on with, their ranks at the players and the coaching staff. If Jason Kidd wants to come back to New York, we know that but one of his closest allies in the NBA right now is Giannis Antetokounmpo from their time in Milwaukee. So is there some back channeling that's been going on that the Knicks have learned if Jason Kidd gets the New York Knicks job, that if Giannis ends up getting traded, that he will make it a point, send me to New York? Because he doesn't have a no trade clause. He can't decline trades the way that Bradley Beal can. But star players have a ton of leverage. And if they say, I'm only going to play in New York, he can potentially call out the bluff of some of these teams that are going to be offering the Milwaukee Bucks a package for Giannis's services. And we don't know what the Bucks' official choice is going to be in regards to moving him or keeping him on the roster, because they've got their own issues there with the second apron and Damian Lillard being out. But if Jason Kidd ends up getting signed by the New York Knicks and they go above and beyond to get him out of his contract there in Dallas, I think they would only be doing that if they know something about Giannis in the future of his tenure with the Milwaukee Bucks.
One more thing on this, then we'll move on. And you just kind of alluded to what I was going to ask you, whether it's Giannis or anybody else, because part of me, Rob, believes they do have a little bit of a roster construction issue if they want to take the next step. And, the East is going to be interesting because we don't know what's going to happen with Giannis, and Tatum's out for the year, and Boston has some economic decisions to make. So when you look at where the Knicks reside in this ecosystem, they could make a case that they're right there with everybody else next year. But I think if they want to take the next step and go to a final and maybe actually win the thing, there are some roster construction issues they have to look at. And your points about DeLon Wright, who was a Ute, we had him out here, and Landry Shamet and others are, they're salient, fair points that I won't push back on. I don't know that I love their bench. And Tom's track record does speak for itself, whether it's DeLon Wright or Manu Ginobili. He might have a tough time playing off the bench. I understand that. But do you think they look to do something? Look, I don't know what it looks like because they obviously traded 5 picks for Bridges. He's up for an extension. Cat, OG, and Jalen are all signed for quite some time. So I'm not sure what sort of flexibility they have, but do you think they look to tinker with this roster this offseason?
Yeah, even if you liked some of those bench pieces that had a hard time seeing the floor under Tom Thibodeau, those DeLon Wrights, Landry Shamets, Precious Achiuwa, they're coming off the books.
Yep.
They're not under contract. So even if you liked them, you got to re-sign them and come to a completely separate negotiation. And now if they end up leaving, you thought the Knicks were thin before? What happens when Pacome Donier and Tyler Kolek and Ariel Huck-Porty are asked to step in and fill those minutes?
Yeah.
Right? Those are supposed to be the farm system of which the Knicks are replenishing that bench talent with, but they may not even have the horses in the stable to be able to do it with a coach that can properly develop, because they are very much in win now mode. We know the way that this collective bargaining agreement works. Your championship window lasts about 3 to 4 years before the players or the front office have some really tough decisions to make. The good news for the Knicks is their star, Jalen Brunson, has taken what is essentially a pay cut, right, by signing his contract early, not maximizing on an extension. And Mikal Bridges has a team-friendly deal. A lot of these guys are willing to take less dollars because they enjoy playing with each other, and I thought they made that very apparent. But you're right. Even with all of those guys and the math working out like this, they still have about Deuce McBride off the bench right now and one more year of Mitchell Robinson, and that's about it. And if the Oklahoma City Thunder and Indiana Pacers have proved anything to us this playoffs, it's the importance of not only having 12 to 13 guys, but 12 to 13 guys that can play efficiently and have that same influence and seamlessly replace the starters in the form of any basketball adversity. The New York Knicks do not have that right now. They play slow, they play in the half court, and they're top heavy with their iron 5. And there was once a time where, you know what, if you have 6 to 7 guys like the Hamptons 5 with the Golden State Warriors, you just needed a Sean Livingston off the bench. You just needed some David West, and that was it. You could still win a title. I'm afraid those days have come and gone in the age of pace and space.
Moving out this way, we'll end with the finals, but I did want to kind of kick the tires with you on where we find ourselves here in Salt Lake with a team that's entering the fourth year of the post-Mitchell Gobert Quinn Snyder group that was really fun here for about 8-9 years before it fell apart, famously and dramatically. So Austin Ainge is brought in now as the president of basketball ops. Ryan Smith, the owner out here, said during his opening presser when he introduced Austin that he is now the guy. He's the loudest voice in the front office. All of the final decisions will be his, meaning his dad, Danny, reports to him. And the general manager, Justin Zanuck, reports to Austin Ainge. It's interesting. The other thing they did, Rob, is they extended Will Hardy. Tom Thibodeau goes to the Eastern Conference Finals. He loses his job. Will Hardy's won 33% of his games, and he has a contract through like 2031. So what they've done is solidified a coaching staff and a front office and given them all long-term extensions in the hopes that at some point the talent on the floor will look a little bit better than it has prior to. So this will be year 4, okay, of this project that really hasn't brought a lot of progress. They were front-facing about being unserious concerning competition last year to try to get the number 1 pick. It didn't work. They're at 5. So what are your thoughts on a coaching staff and front office that is in place while talent on the floor is badly, badly needed here in Salt Lake?
Yeah, well, first of all, the coaches can't go onto the floor and play themselves, right? So you're going to have to get some talented players out there at some point. Even the great Red Auerbach or John Wooden wouldn't be able to take last year's Jazz team to the Western Conference playoffs. Now, with Will Hardy, the example that I like to use is if he was a baseball pitcher, what do you think is more important, their win-loss record or their ERA? And you know the answer to this,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, sure. ERA.
Yeah, ERA. Like wins and losses is dependent on the bullpen, on the offense that day. And you could have a 7.0 ERA on the best team and have a great win-loss record. That doesn't show a whole lot. So with Will Hardy, he's coaching a team that had a player participation policy violation last year because the Utah Jazz failed to be properly announcing, the presence of Lauri Markkanen for some of these games and getting accused of load management. So even the players that don't have the talent to compete at a championship level aren't even being provided, to him. And every game was something different. There'd be a week of Walker Kessler out there with Sexton and Clarkson, and then they'd be gone for a week. I don't know many coaches that would be able to succeed. And Ryan Smith's a sharp guy. Certainly Danny Ainge is too. And they saw something in Will Hardy that they feel like has longevity and sustainability towards whatever they're working towards. Now, Austin comes in, and I'm sure a lot of fans that don't understand, the experience that he has probably just see that last name and think, oh, we know why he got this job, right? Is he qualified? Yeah. Listen, he's been with the Boston Celtics and been responsible for a lot of their draft picks, coaching G League teams, being in the front office there, making a whole bunch of those, just helping make a whole bunch of those decisions that ultimately led to a title and them being the favorites for a majority of this season before they were upset by the New York Knicks. So this is not just, tapping in the kid from a scene from Succession who has no experience involved with parks and tourism, and now you're that senior vice president of this entire division. No. He has been in these trenches for many, many years. So if he's the loudest voice in the room, I think it's that cohesion that he has already with Ryan Smith and Will Hardy because of his father that'll make this such a seamless transition. And it may not pay dividends right away because you brought it up yourself. This team just doesn't have the talent to compete, but the long-term vision, I trust them to make sharp decisions.
For sure. One more Jazz thing along with the finals, because, one of the things that's been interesting about trying to break down where the Jazz are now and where they could be if some good decisions are made and then compound interest kicks in over time is you try to measure them against it's unfair to do this because Oklahoma City is so good and they're so young and they have so many assets at their disposal to continue to add talent when they have to make tough economic decisions, which they will in a few years. But the Mitchell and Gobert trades at the time were kind of met with this holy smokes, Danny Ainge got what for Rudy? He got that much for Gobert, and he got that much for and the reason I bring it up is essentially the main piece. Well, there are two main pieces, but the main piece they were able to get from Mitchell has turned out to be Lauri Markkanen, who was a really good player in college. He was a Pac-12 kid when the Pac-12 existed at Arizona. And then he had some interesting moments in other stops, Chicago, Cleveland, etc., lands here year one. And when he was playing with grown-ups, Mike Conley, Kelly Olynyk, etc., made an all-star team. The past 2 years, when they've surrounded him with kids, quite frankly, he hasn't looked the same. And I don't view that as an indictment on him, because I still think he can be a really good player for a team that is trying to win. But he also is 28. He'll turn 29 next year, which is hilarious to bring that up as an age issue. But they're so far away that I don't know that he fits the timeline. Do you think they kick the tires on a Markkanen move, on a Kessler move to even reset this thing even more and start with number 5 this year, number 21 next, or number 21 this year as well, and simply just play kids and try to develop their young talent and move off of Markkanen and Kessler? You think we see some movement this offseason?
Yeah, I don't think there's any untouchables on that roster, even with Lauri Markkanen, who would be, the most desirable asset of any team that feels like they are 1 7-foot 3-and-D guy away from being NBA champions, right? And it certainly hurt that the Jazz didn't get a top 2, top 3 pick, because the whole point of keeping these guys on the roster was, well, if we get Cooper Flagg or an Ace Bailey or whoever's at the top here, we can hit the ground running and return to playoff relevancy because of a Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler. But falling that far down into the draft, you're really going to have to find, I'd say, diamond in the rough. Like the number 5 pick has these expectations, the equivalent of a second rounder, but we know that there's a pretty significant difference between Cooper Flagg and the rest of the field. So I think that will change, what their design is for this franchise moving forward. And the Oklahoma City example is what everyone is trying to replicate, by the way. Coming into the 24-25 season, everyone was trying to be the Boston Celtics. They have success shooting threes, so we're going to shoot threes too. Guess what happened? When the Charlotte Hornets attempt 55 threes in a night, it does not hit the same like the Boston Celtics. You are not the Boston Celtics, and you need to stop emulating them. I think the same theory applies to Oklahoma City too. Now, it's certainly admirable that they were on this 4-year plan where the Jazz are right now. Like the Thunder were so bad. They were losing games by 70-plus points to the Memphis Grizzlies with some of those rosters, right? They were stacking up their draft picks. They were getting healthy. They were assembling in the shadows. But there was 2 to 3 years where they had to go through it. And then their young talent got so good so quickly that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Josh Giddey led that team to the play-in tournament as the 10 seed, of which they ultimately lost in. But then that next year, they end up tying for the number 1 overall seed in the Western Conference with their second-round exit. And then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander becomes MVP in year 4 when OKC is clearly the best team. So now someone like the Utah Jazz is saying, how can we do that? How can we grow our talent internally and then not have to stack our assets, not have to trade for a mercenary, and do this the slow, methodical, authentic way? And someone like the Houston Rockets is trying to do that right now, right? That they are refusing to trade their core, the Amen Thompsons and the Jalen Greens, for Kevin Durant's out there. You want to beat the Golden State Warriors like you lost in Game 7 this year if you have Kevin Durant? That certainly wouldn't have been the case. Well, by trading for Kevin Durant, you do trade some of your long-term future as well, right? Because they're not going to give them to you for free. The biggest question here, though, is Jazz fans need to think about this too. Who's your Shai Gilgeous-Alexander?
Yep.
If you're trying to replicate what OKC has accomplished, you're going to need someone to ascend to MVP status. Doesn't actually have to win the award, but finish on the podium. And that's where I think Houston's going to fall short, because Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün do not qualify for that right now. Who on the Utah Jazz can be that guy, that franchise cornerstone that affords you the luxury of time to do this the right way? I don't know if that's on the roster right now.
Yeah, I don't think that it is. And that's why I kind of always bring up the Mitchell trade in context. Like ultimately, maybe at the time when both Indiana and OKC, ironically enough, moved on from Paul George, Paul was probably thought to be a little bit better of a player than Donovan was 3 years ago. But Donovan's gone on to first-team All-NBA in Cleveland. And, what Oklahoma City was able to turn Paul George into was SGA and 5 draft picks, one of which turned into Jalen. And the Jazz didn't turn Mitchell into a star yet. There are plenty of picks that will convey that maybe they can find a diamond in the rough. But whenever I try to analyze the Jazz against some of these other teams, like Detroit was the worst team in pro basketball last year, but Detroit has Cade. Orlando is a team that not too long ago was wandering in the wilderness, but they've got Paulo and maybe even Franz Wagner, depending on how you analyze them. The Jazz don't have, Rob, one of those guys on this roster. They just don't, at least not as of now.
That's going to be the solve, man. I think that's what everyone's trying to figure out too, because every executive in the NBA is probably sitting there saying, "Man, I wish I could have the same amount of time that Sam Presti had to execute his game plan."
Yep.
Kobe Altman in Cleveland was the only one who can probably say that I had that same amount of time. And that was after LeBron left, where all of those expectations cratered, right? The whole world knew that it was going to take years and years for Cleveland to return to relevancy. But eventually they got there a lot quicker, and they expedited that reloading because of that trade for Donovan Mitchell, the emergence of Darius Garland, so on and so forth. But not every front office is given that time. I looked at Phoenix, where you get a new owner and a new governor in town, and the new owner syndrome is need to make a good first impression. You only get one chance, right? So we're going to go out there and we're going to make all of these trades to win now. We're going to liquidate our future assets, and we'll see what happens. Well, it didn't work out. You didn't even make the playoffs, and now you're stuck in the second apron, and it's going to take years to recover. And those general managers get thrown under the bus, even though they probably didn't want to even do that in the first place. I'm sure they all would love this long-term plan that doesn't always parallel with the front office's direction of the business as well. So will Ryan Smith afford that front office the time to try and replicate what Oklahoma City did? And if you don't have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, then it's going to take more than 4 years. How long is the fan base willing to sit there and go through that process, pun intended, before you realize, like, all right, this is enough. Like, you've tried to reset. It's time to just, like, return to some form of relevancy. So it's not as easy as it sounds. Otherwise, everyone else would be doing it.
Well said. All right, Rob, before I set you loose, let's do a little NBA Finals. I am curious how you've digested this Indiana Pacer run as a Knick fan, watching Halliburton do the Reggie Miller choke sign. I am curious how you digested that Game 1 collapse from New York. And then, look, I am so wildly – I cannot stand the Pacers as a Knick fan, as you know, but I'm so wildly impressed with what Rick Carlisle has done with them. I don't think they have a shot against OKC. That's just my opinion. Like everyone else, I feel like I picked OKC in 5. And impressed that they're leaving OKC with a split. We'll see what happens back in Indianapolis. But before I set you loose, how have you digested this Pacer run, and do you think they can make it interesting the rest of the way against just a juggernaut Thunder team?
Yeah, it's not an accident at this point. What the Pacers have accomplished is earned. I mean, coming into this postseason, only once out of nearly 2,000 tries had a team come back from 7-point or more deficit in the final 50 seconds of regulation or overtime. And the Indiana Pacers have done it thrice in one playoffs. Okay, that is not a statistical anomaly. That is not an impossibility. It's a mere improbability now. That they have made that a reality is crazy. And it's earned because Tyrese Halliburton keeps putting himself in this spot where he can create his own luck. And whether it was the shot to eliminate the Milwaukee Bucks, it was the step back on Ty Jerome in Game 2, where they really exhausted Donovan Mitchell, and then you allow Halliburton to get to that right hand for the game-winning 3. We know what the shot in Madison Square Garden in Game 1. It hits off the back iron. It goes up into the rafters, and somehow, some way, it falls through that circle of iron 20 feet below it. You know, the math just doesn't make sense anymore. But these things keep happening. And then Game 1 happens as well. And against a team with this just historical defense in Oklahoma City, for them to steal that game, I am shocked, but I'm not surprised. Right? I'm shocked. I'm not surprised, because this should be 2-0 Oklahoma City. It has been utter domination in these finals thus far, both sides of the ball. The biggest lead for the Pacers in both of these games is 3 points. They led for 0.3 seconds in Game 1. And Oklahoma City probably feels like we are the far superior team because we can replicate everything that they do, but better. Right? They have made Tyrese Halliburton look quite mortal other than one shot in this series. So not to take anything away from the Pacers, but their influence, especially on the defensive side of the ball with Andrew Nembhard and Aaron Nesmith, is not being felt in the same way against Shea Gilgeous-Alexander as it was some of the stars previously. That's due to Shea's size, his skill, his talent. But, yeah, I do believe they're going to fall a little short, and I've got OKC in 5 as well.
Rob, good stuff, my friend. I always appreciate the time. Keep up the awesome work. Love to do it again soon, okay?
You got it, my friend.
All right. Rob Perez, better known online as Worldwide Wob with a W. That's where you can get him on social media. SiriusXM, Bleacher Report, does a bunch of different radio and TV shows. Really entertaining, fun NBA personality. Appreciate his time today. All right, Rob stops by today, courtesy of our friends at IFA Country Stores. When the seasons change, like, right now, it's about 90 degrees today. If you're like any good coach, you'll put together your game plan for a healthy green lawn, and you'll turn to the experts at IFA. You can check out their 4+ lawn care program, everything you need to make your yard a hit. It's the ultimate lawn owner power move at IFA and IFA.coop. All right, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Coming up on the other side, Weber State legend, current broadcaster for the Indiana Pacers, Eddie Gill, joins us. Richard Smith will be live in studio for an entire hour. Uncle Ted Robinson stops by later on. We'll get to the House v. NCAA settlement and do some off-season college football with Ted. And a little French Open final as well, as Ted has called some of the best tennis matches of all time. So, busy show, and you got dialed into the Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, we got Game 3, Stanley Cup Final tonight. It's the Oilers and the Panthers. The puck will drop at 6 o'clock Mountain Time, which is right when we say goodnight. So we'll send it over to coverage of the Stanley Cup Finals. NBA Finals resume coming up on Wednesday. We're also your home of the NBA Finals here in the market if you're looking to tune in. If you can't be at home in front of your television. So Game 3 coming up. We got Richard Smith live in studio. Smitty spent 40 years with the Jazz front office. Ted Robinson later on to talk some college football, but excited for this. He was a great player here in college and spent a number of years playing professional basketball and now finds himself doing certain things, namely being one of the Pacers analysts for Indiana Pacer games. Eddie Gill on the program on this Monday afternoon. Eddie, happy Monday, man. How you doing?
Man, happy Monday to you. I appreciate you guys having me.
No, I appreciate the time. So for all of our Weber State Wildcat listeners and fans, give us a life update, man. What have you been up to? How are things with you and the family? And we'll go from there.
Yeah, things are fantastic. I can't complain, man. I'd be hard-pressed to complain about anything, to be honest with you. My time at Weber State was tremendous. I'm forever grateful for those opportunities. And then once I left Weber State, prior to my son was born, I was married. So at this point now, married with 2 kids, 25 and 23, my son and daughter. But after I left Weber State, I chased the basketball around the world for 12 years. 7 of those years were in the NBA, and 2 of those years were with the Pacers. And I settled down in Indiana now. So now I'm doing a little broadcast work with them. And then I tell people my real job, which I've been doing for 10-plus years now, is in financial planning.
Ah, very nice. Very nice. How do you like the media gig? It's always interesting for me to talk to players when they get into this space. How you liking it?
I love it. I mean, the Pacers have been very, very, very good to me. I'm grateful for the opportunity. They blessed me with this opportunity a little more than 9 years ago, and I'm wrapping up my 9th season. And as you know, once in a lifetime opportunity to be calling the NBA Finals right now.
For sure, and it's been quite a ride. And let's just kind of dig into the Pacers stuff a little bit. And from your vantage point, Eddie, where I want to start with them is when did you – it's been interesting for me to listen to Rick Carlisle after games and after series where the Pacers have won, just readily admit, like, we're on fire right now. Like, we have been playing really good basketball for quite some time. And I'm not sure how many people around the ecosystem of pro basketball saw this coming. When did you start noticing that there was something different and something special about this Pacer team?
I go back to when they made the trade for Pascal Siakam last season. I thought the expectations and the trajectory of where this team could possibly go changed significantly then. Obviously, get into the second round last season, go past the second round, get to the Eastern Conference Finals last year, and lose to the Boston Celtics, who go on to win it. But being able to get back to the Eastern Conference Finals this season and then beat the Knicks, and now find yourself in the finals, I mean, it's just incredible. And every coach and every team would love to get hot, as they say, the proverbial right time of the season, and that's towards the end. And that's exactly what this team has done. I think after the All-Star break this year, they put it in another gear. They've been top 2 or 3 teams since the All-Star break, and they just continue to ride the wave of incredible basketball. I mean, winning some impossible type games, and now have an opportunity to hoist the trophy here in June.
So it's funny you reference post All-Star break, because that's when I started to notice there was something a little bit different about them. And I'm sure you know this, ironically enough, the 2 best records in the NBA since January 1, one is Oklahoma City and 2 is Indiana. So clearly Rick was able to do something rotationally or systematically with their different concepts to help them fly a bit. Was there something you noticed post All-Star break that they did differently? Were there different rotations? Were there different schematic approaches? Or was it just a group that figured out how to play together?
Well, I think a couple things. First and foremost, as you know, the primary goal for any team is to stay healthy. And early on in the season, they did have some health issues. Andrew Nembhard was out, missed significant time. Aaron Nesmith missed significant time. These are 2 critical pieces to what they do defensively. And once those 2 got healthy, they really took off, and it really took it to another level. The last couple seasons, they've been amongst the elite offensively as a team. But until they took the defensive end of the floor seriously, they hadn't been able to compete at a very high level. And over the last little bit, again, post All-Star break, you get healthy, you take that end of the floor seriously, and now you're competing for a championship.
As a guy who played lead guard at the highest of levels, what stands out most to you about the growth of Tyrese Halliburton? I don't do the whole first take, shticky, overrated, whatever radio. It's so dumb to me. But that's received a lot of attention that some of his peers may have cast a vote for him as the more, most overrated player in the league. Eddie, as you know, he's an Olympian and he's been an all-star. He doesn't have to answer to anybody as far as what sort of player he is. He proves it. But you played that position. What stands out most to you as far as how Tyrese has been able to grow?
I think command of the game. I think that's the biggest thing, and I would agree with you. The whole star, superstar, those are idiotic conversations, and it's all subjective. And I get it in some degree. Some of these things is partially based in entertainment, and we got to entertain people, and that's part of it. So sometimes it's a fun conversation. But any real credence, just recognize guys for the gifts that they have and what they've been able to, the work they put into the game to really advance those gifts. And he's been able to get that done. It's the command he has for the game. He reads the floor as good or better than anyone in terms of being able to facilitate offense for his team. And just having the confidence, the shot making that he has in late game situation is second to none. Those are the things that you just can't teach. You just hope you have a guy like that on your team, and he's that. But yeah, he just knows how to get the team in gear in terms of an offensive standpoint, put teams or his teammates in position to win. I give Rick Carlisle a lot of credit also to your original point about what he's been able to do. I played for Rick Carlisle. He is a very different coach now than he was when I played for him in terms of the rigor and almost the script that he has in play for a game. He's adjusted tremendously to the game. And he couldn't be in better position than to have a guy like Tyrese Halliburton running the show for him.
So help me understand, Eddie, a game like last night where Tyrese isn't able to get much going until the fourth, and by the time he did, it was a 20-point game. Is that something where he just needs to be a little bit more forceful about his approach early? Is it Oklahoma City simply trying to scheme to take him out of it? I mean, OKC has so many good perimeter defenders that I don't want to be too hard on Halliburton, but as you know, they need him, and they cannot afford for him to wait to really get engaged until the fourth quarter. So what happened last night? Was it more OKC scheming to take him out of it, or did you see something from him where you feel like moving forward he needs to be a little bit more intentional and forceful?
Listen, I think two things can be true, right? They are one of the best defensive teams we've seen ever in the game, and also he needs to be more aggressive. I think that's a fair criticism. He's had some games where he takes his foot off the gas a little bit in terms of attacking the basket, attacking the paint, making multiple defenders guard him, always being a threat out there on the floor. Sometimes he will defer early on in sets instead of making the defense commit multiple bodies to him before he elects to pass the ball. So I think both are true, and I think he knows that because he's had a handful of games like that where he's not as aggressive early on. And to your point, yeah, in the fourth quarter he gets a little bit more aggressive, but the game is decided by then. So it's just a matter of making sure he comes out with the appropriate mindset that says, hey, I'm going to be a threat at all times, regardless to the fact that this is an all-time great defense or not. He's got the requisite talent to make it tough on them. He's put in the requisite work. So he's got to go out there and put his foot on the gas right out the gate each and every night.
So let's move over now to the other side. And obviously, SGA has evolved into, potentially one of the best players in the world. Obviously, your reigning MVP. But I'm gonna ask you the same thing about Shea that I asked you about Tyrese, because again, you played that position. I wonder what stands out most to you about the way he's grown and just how difficult he is to contain when he really has it going.
Yeah, and he's different than they're two very different players.
For sure,
right?
for sure.
It's more pass pass first guard, but has the capability to score, which the Pacers need him to do. So it's just, getting his mind state in terms of finding that balance of being able to run the offense but also score. SGA is the guy who's like, I'm coming out here and I'm getting 30 no matter what happens. Right? So it's a different mindset. But when you also couple the fact that he has an incredible skill set, a 3-level scorer, he also, what other piece that sets him apart is his ability to get to the free throw line. So even if he doesn't have it going from the field, he's going to get himself to the line probably 10 times per game. So that's an added bonus for him. But, just the maturation of his game, I give their management a lot of credit as well. Sam Presti and their coach, Mark Dagnall, they've done a great job of breathing life into his game as the leader of that team. And then they complement him really well. They've made a asserted interest in getting it done on the defensive end of the floor. They make sure that he's also accountable, so he's not taking plays off on that end. He's making sure that he does a great job there. If you try to go after him, especially in any one-on-one situations, he's going to hold his ground and be good on that end. But, offensively, you have to commit so many different bodies to him. And when you do, you see guys like Wiggins get loose. Caruso will get loose. And they end up having big nights because they're alone in a three-point line or they're alone in transition finishing at the rim.
So where does this, it's funny, Eddie, and we're chatting with Eddie Gill, former Weber State Wildcat, pro baller, and now a broadcaster for the Indiana Pacers. I'm a lifelong Knick fan, grew up in the Northeast, so I'm watching Knicks Pacers, watching that series, and, of course, watching playoff basketball, period. And all of these wild comebacks the Pacers have had, it says something about the group. And so I'm watching game one of the NBA Finals, and Shea hits that layup to put OKC up, I think, 9 with about 90 seconds left. And my buddy who I'm watching the game with is like, oh, that probably does it. Game over. I'm like, oh, you haven't been watching these guys. Like, hold on a second. Don't go anywhere. What does that say? I'm trying to figure out the best way to ask the question. What does that say to you about this group, and where does fortitude like that come from? Because so many players, Eddie, when you are up against it and the clock is running out and you're down big, you see teams 1, 2, 3 Cancun it all the time. These dudes just have no quit in them. Where does that come from?
There's no question about it. The mental fortitude and strength that they have to say, hey, we're going to play to their zeros on the clock no matter what. And everyone preaches it, right? Everyone says it, we're going to do it. But these guys live it. It's a lifestyle. And they've been able to pull off the impossible or the seemingly impossible, 4 or 5 times just in these playoffs alone. But to your point about your buddy, they were doing it towards the end of the season also. So they had prepared themselves for these playoff moments late in the season. But, again, it's just the confidence, it's the resiliency, it's the culture that they've created. That is just to continue to play. They have, again, a guy like Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, Ben Shepherd coming off the bench, T.J. McConnell coming off the bench, like really tough, hard-nosed guys who are just going to, they've earned their keep on the defensive end of the floor, and B, they just have incredible self-belief in themselves. So, they're just gonna keep going. And for me, I guess really inspirational to whether you like sports or not. It's inspirational in terms of just like, hey, if you just stick with something, you never know what will happen.
All right, so now we move over to game 3. First of all, paint the picture, because I'll tell you what, obviously you lived out here, you played your college ball out here, and, the Jazz are in a tough spot right now, but when the Jazz are good and it's playoff basketball in Salt Lake, I feel like it sounds and feels a lot like it does where Oklahoma City plays their basketball. But obviously the crowd in Indianapolis will be ready for this. So set the scene. Like, what sort of buzz is there around that city as the Pacers are back in the finals for the first time in forever? And how excited is the community, and what are you expecting to see game 3?
Listen, it's sheer exuberance. The city is ecstatic about this moment. And I think I got the feeling that there's a little bit of a challenge because there is not a better environment than Oklahoma City Thunder's environment. Just objectively speaking, their playoff environment and really in-season environment is incredible. Those fans, they show up early. You don't have to talk them into putting T-shirts on or threaten them with, hey, you put your T-shirt on or this will happen and that kind of thing that you may see in some arenas because some people show up and don't want to put a T-shirt on. that entire arena in Game 1 was decked out in white. Game 2, they were decked out in blue. I think you'll see much of the same at Gainbridge Fieldhouse for the Pacers. It will be decked out in gold, and they will definitely bring the energy. It's been 25 years since they had this opportunity, the fan base in this organization. So they will come with great energy. They were fantastic in that New York Knicks series. I anticipate the same thing again here with the opportunity to win a championship. So, I mean, to be able to cover it, to be a fan, and, you know, these are moments that you just don't forget.
All right, Eddie, before I set you loose, look, obviously you're a broadcaster for the Pacers. You live in Indiana. You played for the team. So I'm not trying to be disrespectful, and I promise I'm not. This just feels like a really tough ask for them to be able to find a way to win 3 more games. And that's just a statement and a testament of who OKC is, not who Indiana is not. So how do they get this done? I mean, they come on with a split, which is all you want when you go on the road. When they're getting up and down, man, they're a handful, as you know. I'm sure that crowd will juice them up. I'm sure they're going to try to get out in transition. But before I set you loose, how does Rick get this done? How do the Pacers get 3 more wins?
Yeah, it's a fair ask. But the only argument that they might say, or many people would say, is the same question was asked: is how do you get past the Cleveland Cavaliers?
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to get that done. Now, in fairness, they missed Darius Garland in Game 1, and you know but those guys all came back and they took a beating when they all came back. So that argument kind of goes out the window. Again, it's the self-belief that this has in this team, and you know, when you're playing against a team like the Cavs or the Oklahoma City, your margins of error shrink dramatically. All the fundamentals of the game remain the same. It's just the margins of error shrink, and they just got to continue to stay locked in on the details. I do think offensively they have to play early on in the shot clock against this team. You get stuck in a half-court set against this team, it's going to be difficult, and we've seen that in the first 2 games, even when they won the Game 1. But in Game 1, the Pacers were able to defend at a high level, which they had been doing up to this point in the season, to keep them in the game and give them an opportunity to pull a rabbit out of the hat once again, like we've seen them do a number of times, because they do and are willing to stick with it regardless of what the lead may be. So I think that's it. Stick with the details. Offensively, play in transition, and not worry about people saying what they can or can't do.
Eddie, my friend, it's been great to catch up. It's been a long time. Of course, you're still thought of very fondly out this way. Appreciate your time. Would love to do it again, and I'll be pulling for your Pacers, okay?
Yeah, it's my pleasure. You guys give me a shout anytime.
All right. Eddie Gill was a really good lead guard at Weber State, played his college ball over here, actually started at Eastern Utah, then went to Salt Lake Community College and finished his college career at Weber, and then played for a number of different NBA teams over the course of his grind. He grinded for a decade playing pro basketball. Great guy, and had a chance to scout him when he was in college, actually. Thought he was going to be more of like a settled 10-year, 12-year NBA vet for one team, but he bounced around a bit, and now he's settled in Indiana, where he's a broadcaster for the Indiana Pacers, and the Pacers will try to continue their endeavor to climb up a really steep hill. I don't know how else to say it. Oklahoma City, when they're ticking, they're just that good. And as I referenced to start the show, if you're not somebody who watches a lot of basketball during the regular season, first of all, I totally understand. Because so many of these players don't even show up and play. So if you're just watching OKC for the first time, what you saw last night is what they've done all year to anybody they played, home or away. So don't forget, we'll have Game 3 for you guys coming up on Wednesday. We've got Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final tonight on the radio show, and then, on the radio station. Then Game 3 of the NBA Finals will be on Wednesday night. All right, we'll catch a quick break. Coming up on the other side, Richard Smith will join us live in studio. Smitty spent 40 years with the Utah Jazz. He'll be on our draft night coverage, so we'll bring in Smitty for an hour. Ted Robinson later on to talk some college football. The House v. NCAA settlement was pushed across the line on Friday afternoon, actually right after we said goodnight on the show, and a massive heavyweight blow-by-blow tennis final at Roland Garros in the French Open that we'll get to Ted with about as well. So we got a busy Monday show, and it's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. It's a throwback to the old Bill and Spence days is what this is. Little YouTube for you on a Monday afternoon. We've got Ted Robinson from the Pac-12 Network. Well, formerly of the Pac-12 Network. He'll stop by to do some college football as the House v. NCAA settlement was pushed across the line on Friday. If you missed Eddie Gill, a lot of fun catching up with Eddie Gill today. Then Rob Perez batted leadoff. But in the cleanup spot, because that's where we save the big bats, Richard Smitty Smith, 40 years with the Jazz front office. Hello, Smitty. Happy Monday. How are you, sir? Let's get his microphone on. Can I do that? Let's try one. There we go. There we go.
That's what's going to see. That's what happens. See, I'm so glad. Spence,
switch mic. Sorry, Smitty.
That you got me in. That you got me in here ahead of Ted Robinson, because there's no way I am following that guy.
He's the best
on a radio show.
Yeah.
He is the absolute top of the mountain. I've admired him from afar for so long, for all the stuff he does and all the areas he covers in the world of sports. He's just terrific, and so he's a great get for you guys whenever you can get him on. He's terrific.
And I would imagine with Ted, we'll talk a little Roland Garros Grand Slam final for the ages. You're a tennis guy. We'll do mostly basketball, but I was telling you off air, man, when I see shot making like that at the highest, it's just so wildly impressive, and you watch the whole thing.
No, Alcaraz and Sinner yesterday. That 5 set. That was. Sinner was so good early, and Alcaraz just hung in, and those two guys, Alcaraz is 22 years old, Sinner's 23, coming off the suspension that he had in the late winter, early spring, and just getting right back into it in a major like that. Those guys will be battling for a lot of years, with a couple of young guys who are on the way up, I think, but that's going to be fun to watch those guys.
Very impressive. And, my generation, I was raised right in the Sampras, Agassi, American tennis, why don't you think we have developed any of these young, I mean, we were talking about some of the American players, but the best male tennis players in the world right now, I don't feel like any of them reside in the United States.
Yeah. Well,
any thoughts on that?
The last big boy, really, you have to go back almost 20 years with Andy Roddick.
Right.
Was the last guy who was really right in that top level group and around in terms of world class players. And I don't know. I think maybe it's maybe in our country we have too many sports, too many options, too many things that people get involved in, and it seems like a lot of kids are getting involved in specialization, whatever it is they think they're good at, or their parents think they're good at when they're 12 or 13 or 14. And how many kids nowadays, and this is a rhetorical question, but I don't know how many kids nowadays in high school play multiple sports.
Yep.
Like when I grew up, you played football or golf or something in the fall, and then you played basketball in the winter, and then you played baseball in the spring, or soccer or whatever. And now they just play one sport when they get to high school, and it's fascinating to me that the kids are doing that at such a young age. I don't know, some of the foreign countries over in Europe, especially in the Scandinavian countries, are more better ahead of us in terms of researching all that stuff and all the cross training benefits of doing different things. And maybe it's just guys don't get into tennis as much early on, and then they just kind of drift away from it.
Well, it feels like the ecosystem surrounding sports for kids have really changed, where if you want your child to be in a prism and paradigm and have the attention of like a head coach in high school, he needs to be playing AAU at 10 for the AAU team that's tied to the coach, or he needs to be, focusing on one sport when he's so young. And, I didn't raise my son that way. Connor ended up playing soccer in high school, but he tried basketball, golf, all these things. And like you, my sport was predicated on the season. Now, I did end up only playing basketball my final 2 years in high school. Prior to that, it was football in the fall, it was basketball in the winter, then it was lacrosse in the spring. And I just feel like now parents are kind of, I don't know if pressure is the right term, maybe motivated. If they think they have a kid who can play high school basketball or whatever and maybe do something beyond it, it feels like they only hone in on that one sport to give the kid the best chance at walking that path where he can make teams. I mean, it feels like it's changed that way.
Yeah, I learned Spence a while ago. A good friend of mine came to me with their 12-year-old son, and he was a very good athlete at that time, like doing a lot of different things. And they were perplexed because they were being pressured by the respective coaches of the different sports. Like, hey, your son's gotta decide what he's gonna do because he can't do everything because we in our sport, whichever one it was, we go year round. We practice and we travel and we do tournaments and we have our own schedule and league or whatever. So, he can't play different sports because he's going to have to practice and he's going to have to and that's coming from these recreational / volunteer coaches from the dad who sits on the couch every night and watches ESPN and then thinks he can do something. And so then he's going out and he thinks he's running his 12-year-old, soccer team or whatever, like the RSL or something. I mean, it's just crazy. And the kids get it, and the kids are pressured like, well, if you want to play comp soccer, if you want to play comp basketball, you have to choose because you can't do both because of the pressure that those teams are putting on them. And so sometimes I wonder if the kids really, are being directed in that way by people other than their family or the people who have the most interest in their own development. Yeah,
and the other thing, Smitty, that I think has changed recently that probably adds an extra layer of the parental pressure, because ultimately, like, I coached my son's junior jazz team for a few years, and it's always the parents that ruin the experience, especially when they're 6, 7, 8 years old. These kids just want to have fun, and they're kids. They should just have fun. But now with the ability to make real money in college, it's no longer like, oh, maybe my son can earn a scholarship and we can save money that way and he can still go to school or what. Now it's mom and dad are seeing, dollar bills and they're seeing dollar signs in their eyes. Like, okay, we've got a young man who's shown a little promise, and if he can elevate himself to becoming a college athlete, now there's millions of dollars being made from these kids in college, which probably ups the ante for a lot of the parents that selfishly believe their kid is the next Tiger Woods or whatever.
Right. And so in my lifetime, how much that scale has slid backwards from being a so-called professional at the real professional level when you're in your 20s and whatever the sport is, and then backing up to college, right, in recent years. And now that's trickling back to high school, where kids are being directed in certain areas, to go to, like, the academy that's in Atlanta, that's set up for the high school kids to go there and play and develop, as juniors or seniors, and being paid to go to those schools, to do that. Overtime Elite is who I'm referring to, and or you can go to IMG Academy and get paid, but specialized training. But now, how far does that keep sliding back? When does it stop, or does it when eventually it gets like the junior high level? And now we're directing kids, coming out of 6th grade to go in a certain direction or what have you. In Europe, I would say this: in Europe, they have all these youth academies that are high school age kids, and if you're identified in a sport, whether it's soccer, basketball, individual sports, tennis, you can go to an academy that specializes in that when you're 13, 14, 15 years old. That's what, Luka Doncic did from Slovenia. He was identified as a 14-year-old and was taken by Real Madrid in Spain to move from Slovenia to Spain, to another country at 14 years old, to start playing so-called professional basketball, training for that. And they do that, and of course that's a model that's been used forever in the soccer world, right, all around the world, and how much money the European soccer clubs, and especially the English Premier League clubs, put into scouting and development of guys, where they just pour money into it, hand over fist, all over the world, in hopes of finding the one guy or the two guys or whatever that are going to pan out 10 years from now and be one of our star players. And how much of that is starting to creep into the American system and the university collegiate system, which is fascinating right now at this point in time.
Yeah, and you hear Coach Witt, I believe Morgan has talked about this too, Kyle oftentimes has talked about how when he's recruiting his high school football prospects, he very much appreciates when they're versed in other sports and play other things and don't only do football. And look, there's not one. None of this is linear or straight line. There's not one way to do any of it. But I think there's so many skills you can ascertain from playing other sports that do translate to the one sport that you eventually land on. I don't know. I don't love that a lot of these kids, even when they're so young, are just basically told like you've got to pick one thing and do that one thing. I appreciated the lessons I learned playing other sports. You know what I mean?
Well, when you do that, Spence, and you tunnel vision into one sport, you as a kid, you're 13, 14, 15 years old. No matter what people are saying to you, there comes a time when internally, you get to a point where you're thinking, well, I guess I'm just doing this one thing because it's supposed to take me somewhere, in a financial or career-oriented status or projection, rather than I'm doing it to have fun and to be involved and to enjoy being around the other kids my age and all, which is what it was supposed to be.
Right.
And now it's a business down to that level, which to me is a little scary if you really pull back from 30,000 feet and look at what we're doing in this country, just in general in our society with a lot of facets of our life. That part to me is going to be interesting years from now when we reflect back on this era and we look and see what we were doing to the young kids in that regard and how the purpose of those endeavors changed over the years.
Sure. All right, let's move over. We'll do some jazz in our second segment. We'll do a little jazz here, but I want to bring in the NBA Finals and kind of tie it all together a little bit. It's interesting to consider that both Indiana and Oklahoma City turned Paul George into their franchise pillars in a roundabout way. Indiana had Paul George. They trade him for Domo Sabonis. Then they trade Sabonis to the Kings, and they land Halliburton. Oklahoma City turns Paul George into Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 5 draft picks, one of who has turned into Jalen Williams. And so now you have these two teams whose cornerstones were a direct result of a trade the front office made for a superstar that they jettisoned. Did the Jazz get enough for Donovan?
Yeah, well,
Is the way I was thinking. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And maybe at the time, Paul George was thought to be a better asset than Donovan. And Lowry's a very nice player. But if you're going to do what Indiana and Oklahoma City did with Paul George and what the Jazz did with Donovan, you better find something pretty special in return.
Well, the Paul George thing is interesting because in both of those situations, he really cornered the organization and told them he wanted out.
Right.
So in Indiana, he threatened he wasn't going to re-sign, so they traded him to OKC. In OKC, he just bluntly told them, "I want out of here, and I'm going to sulk, and I'm not going to be a good boy or whatever if you don't do this." And both organizations felt like, well, we're backed in the corner, we got to do something, whatever. In OKC's point, look, whether they were smart, whether they got lucky, I think Sam Presti, who's obviously one of the great general managers in NBA history, really, when you look at what he's done over the years in OKC and even his work before in San Antonio when he first got into the league. But he may be the first one to tell you that, hey, look, we had to make the trade for Paul George. We got a bunch of stuff from the Clippers. Paul George was the big asset. Shai Gilgeous, we wanted him put in the deal. They said, okay. The Clippers think that SGA would be the player he's become. Would they have traded him, right? I mean, of course they wouldn't. So the fair question on the flip side is, did OKC think he could become that type of player? I don't think so. I think he was a nice player. They had to make a deal. They did the deal. He came in. He blew up. Okay, we look good. Okay, we look like we're pretty smart. Similar to the Jazz, several years ago drafting Donovan Mitchell at 13 or Rudy Gobert at 27, and you look pretty good when they show up and they develop into what they are. And Some of it is you and your projection and how you evaluate players, and some of it is luck and up to the players to do what they do. I mean, Frank Layden was always great about deferring. Whenever the John Stockton, the draft and in '84 would come up, and they Stockton at 16, and they said, how'd you know he was going to be such a great player? And Frank Layden would always quickly say, hey, if we knew he was going to be such a great player, we would have traded up to get him, because we're not going to wait till 16 to get him. So nobody knows those things. So there's only a few players now and then. Everybody, whether it's Shaq or whether it's Duncan or whether it's Wembanyama, even Giannis, Jokic, those guys weren't that coming in the door. They were like, yeah, we hope they can do something. Yeah, we'll see. We'll work with them, whatever. And then they, much to their credit, they blow up and they become who they are. And so it makes you look good as an organization. And I know the Jazz are trying to latch on to somebody who they can, maybe get in that regard at some point. I don't think they've got it yet, but they're trying to keep taking swings at it and trying to find the next guy who may jump out at them, and they continue to do that. And so far, they haven't hit on it. And again, Spence, as we've always said, some of it is stuff you do, and some of it is stuff you plan, and you can execute based on your acumen in doing so. And then some of it is just luck or something that falls in your lap, and you got to be able to be ready to accept that when it comes your way. And the Jazz so far are still treading water in that regard.
I really am genuinely curious how history will look at the Mitchell deal. And again, whether it's the Donovan trade or the Rudy trade, I said it at the time. I'll continue to say it. We can't accurately analyze it until all the picks have been conveyed and we see who the Jazz are able to draft and whether or not that works. So far, the picks that have been conveyed and the opportunities the Jazz have had, I think they've been swings and misses. I think it's only fair to say. So I just have to wonder every time we talk about this situation with the Mitchell stuff, juxtaposed to what both Indiana and OKC were able to turn Paul George into. Lowry's a nice piece, but he's not SGA, and he's not a cornerstone. He's a good player. If you're going to trade a first-team All-NBA guy in his mid-20s, you better get something pretty special back.
Well, and that's the thing, Spence. What you're doing at that time, you're making the decision as an organization, which the Jazz did, and really the new Jazz ownership group headed up by Ryan Smith made the decision that they wanted to move on from all-star level players who were just coming into their prime and who were signed and were under contract for several more years. They had something that was in place that was competitive and one of the better teams in the league. Obviously, the year before they moved those guys, they had the best record in the NBA. But you're talking about making the decision to move guys who are proven. This guy can do it. He's done it. Mm-hmm. We got him. We got him under contract. Why are we moving him? That kind of thing. And so they made the decision to move him. They made the decision to do that for a bunch of guys that, okay, we don't know what any of these guys are. Okay, marketing comes in. Good player, all-star level player. Okay. Bunch of draft picks. Don't know who they are. The guys who are going to be those draft picks are still in high school right now, or something. And so we're just waiting to see, when that bus comes by, who it drops off in our lap and how that works out. But that's always the debate, Spence, when you get in those situations. We have a proven commodity, and we have something in our hand that we control, and we know that it works. And we're willing to move on from that for something that we don't know what we have, and we don't know if it's going to work. That is the interesting dichotomy there, because that is to me, that's a tough decision, to get into making if you're going to trade one for the other. And, so far, the jury's still out, and, you can argue, the results of Gobert, Mitchell, and the other guys who they moved on from, whether it's Mike Conley and, who's near the end of it, or Joe Ingles, who certainly is probably at the end of it, and with those guys, Bogdanovich and all those guys, they were certainly very good players in that group that they had, and that was the decision that was made. And now the Jazz are dealing with that.
So two separate NBA sources, Bill Simmons, in addition to Mark Stein, have mentioned, written, or spoken of the possibility of Utah actively taking phone calls on Larry, actively talking to teams about trading Larry Markkinen. 28 years old, be 29 next year at the end of next season, which certainly is not old. But it could be a scenario where maybe he just doesn't fit the timeline of what they're trying to build, as they've got a couple of first-rounders this year, a bunch of young players on the roster. So help us understand, Smitty, kind of the thought exercises that go into a decision like that. If they do decide to move off of him just based off of maybe his desire to try to win games somewhere else and the Jazz desire to maybe continue to reset to go extremely young. No idea whether or not this is going to happen. These are just discussions that are being had. So if the Jazz are actively taking phone calls on Larry, what are the exercises they're going through is to make the right decision for the club?
Yeah, well, they have to do that, Spence. That's their responsibility. Austin Ainge is now the president of basketball operations. He's going to be the point man going forward for all that kind of stuff. When you're the team that's the worst record in the league, you have nothing to hang your hat on in terms of protecting something we have. In other words, whatever you have, you like it. It's really high on the chart. It's so wherever it lands on the landscape, it's not helping you win games. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter.
Right.
So it's Larry Markkinen, now that he's trade eligible because of the contract he signed last year. So now they can look and see if he has value to other teams. What you're really doing in that regard is, you're not subtracting much from your group, right? Because your group only won 17 games last year.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously they held him out on purpose a lot. They got fined by the league for it and all those kinds of things and the tanking and the draft scenario thing. But they have to be, if they're not accepting calls, that they should also be making calls to see if there's any interest, because the other part of that equation, which is a big part that plays into it, Spence, is he's going to be making in the neighborhood of $45 million.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to pay a guy $45 million on a team that's not going anywhere at the moment and isn't winning games, you might as well look to see what you can turn that into to be able to recalibrate, reset, spend less money somewhere else, and then look at what your whole landscape is going to be. I think bringing Austin Ainge into the equation for me means that they've decided that they're going to open all those doors and talk to everybody who wants to talk and put it all up on the wall and have ongoing discussions with 29 other teams to see who's offering and what and who has an interest in what and whatever. Because you have to figure out something to get this train going forward, and whatever it takes, that's what we have to entertain. And Markkinen is your best player at the moment and your most marketable one, along with maybe Kessler, maybe a little more marketable because he's younger and less money. But those guys, I don't think anything can be off the table because of the situation that you've put yourself in.
Yeah, and these are not easy decisions to make, obviously, when you have a player that you like an awful lot. But, last thing before we catch a break, the timeline analyzation of roster construction is very much a real thing. And I don't know how much of that includes, when you guys really had the Mitchell and Gobert group ticking and you were winning a lot of games, I'm trying to analyze it through the prism of, when is LeBron going to retire, and when does Durant leave the Warriors, and when is Steph not Steph anymore, or whatever it is. And then when that window opens, you have to be ready to walk through it. And before we catch a break, how do you think the Jazz are analyzing the landscape of basketball right now? And is that something they're utilizing to bring color and context into their process and decision-making? Oklahoma City has two players in their rotation that are over 26. Yep. It's Caruso, and Kendrick Williams just turned 30. And they've got their guys signed. They also have draft assets and capital to continue to add pieces to the core that they want to keep together. So will they have to make some economic decisions at some point? Certainly. You always bring up the OKC team with Harden and Durant and Westbrook, that at some point the rubber was going to meet the road, and it did. And it will for them too, but it doesn't feel like it's going to meet the road anytime soon. Like, I think they're going to win it this year and have something to say about it for the next 4 or 5 years, assuming full health. So before we catch a break, how much do teams analyze, like, okay, well, OKC's here. We're in this space. Maybe in 4 or 5 years when they're done with this, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, how much do you analyze that?
That's what we would do all the time. We always had a 3 to 5 year plan that we looked at for every team in the league. And so we would always have that laid out as to what we thought was going to happen. Now, there's certain things you can project, like, in 2 years, this guy's going to be up for either a rookie extension, or this guy's going to be up for his second contract, and he's playing at a certain level, so he's going to get X amount of money, and whether the team likes him and wants to keep him at that number, or whether they're going to try and move him before. Those are always projections and guesses you're making based on your knowledge of the league and how each individual team operates. You're looking at what you think your group is going to be 3, 4, 5 years from now, and how can we position ourselves to be competitive. But then there's always, Spence, that area, there's always a gray area, 20%, 30%, 40%. It's always fluctuating of stuff that's just going to come out of the blue and hit you in the face that you don't expect, whether it's, Giannis decides tomorrow, I definitely want out of Milwaukee, whatever it is,
Yep.
or Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and James Harden put together this big three in Brooklyn, and they're going to run the league for years, and they play 16 total games together. And then COVID hits, and that was part of it. But then one domino fell, and another one. All of a sudden, that thing just fizzles out, and all those guys are somewhere else now, And so you can make those kind of projections, but you can't control those kinds of things, but you try and make educated guesses and base decisions on what you think may happen and what position you want to put your group in.
We got Smitty in studio for another segment after we catch a quick break. But before we do that, I want to tell you about my friends at Advanced Window Products, where you can get $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. This is the company operated by Nate Orchard, still the mayor of Sac Lake City, played in the NFL for 7 or 8 years now, and his buddy Jake Weber runs it with him. So here's the deal. As the weather is getting warm, which it is today, if you notice your house is heating up, it might be because of your windows. So if you need new windows now, today's the day to call. However, if you anticipate maybe holding off until like the fall, maybe you're going to sell your home or buy a new home, when the kids go back to school. If you call and get on the schedule, you simply lock in the savings for whenever you actually need the windows. That's why this deal works. So it's Advanced Window Products. The phone number is 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, 801-850-9100, or online at advancedwindows.com. We got 2 hours down. We got 2 hours to go. More Smitty coming up on the other side right here on a Monday Drive on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, we got Uncle Ted. Ted Robinson's going to roll by. We'll do some college football with Ted, probably some Roland Garros French Open final conversation with a massive heavyweight blow-by-blow tennis match over the weekend. Then we'll get to the 5 o'clock hour of the program, and then after that, we'll say goodnight in time for Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final. Florida-Edmonton series is tied at 1 game apiece. Both games have gone overtime. It's been a lot of fun. But one more segment with our guy Richard Smith live in studio. All right, Smitty, we are just a few weeks away from the NBA draft. And so we'll end this segment with some finals conversation. But before we get there, what's going on right now with the Jazz front office and their preparations for the draft? They currently have 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks. That could change, but that's where they're at. So with just a few weeks left before it's decision time, with a big decision to make, whether they stay at 5 or utilize it as an asset, who knows? But what's going on right now behind closed doors as they're preparing for the draft?
Well, what's interesting, Spence, is because of the situation the Jazz find themselves in now, they've got 4 picks, and those picks are all over. They're spread all over the board. Mm-hmm. So they've got 5 and 21, and then they've got 43 and 53. So they're looking at a whole slew of guys. I don't know what they're doing specifically with workouts and interviews now. I know back in the day, in this scenario, we would literally bring in 80, 90, 100 guys and work them out and get a hold of everybody and do interviews. You're working with other teams on travel arrangements. So a player is going to Denver on Tuesday, and they've got another workout scheduled at Golden State on Friday. Hey, can we jump in and grab them and have them stop off in Salt Lake on Thursday and work them out and get a chance to visit with them and that kind of thing? You can only have 6 guys a maximum on the floor at one time for a workout. You can bring in more than that, but then you have to split the workouts and you have to do like a morning, afternoon thing. So you can set that up. You do interviews. You do personality profiles. You do some measurement. You might do a physical depending on whether they were in the Chicago pre-draft combine or not. So you're getting all those boxes checked with all the guys you might have an interest in, the guys that you're looking at. Then when you don't have a workout and you don't have guys in, you're in the theater at the practice facility over at the Zions Bank basketball campus. You're watching film. You're with your group of guys. You're talking about each guy individually. You're ranking guys. At some point you go through an exercise where everybody ranked their top 10 point guards, whatever you got, and we compile them. You put them together. You talk about that, and you kind of you feel that through, and then you talk about, okay, how about the top 10 guys, period, regardless of position, whatever it is, and it's a major organizational process. But we always used to have the goal, and this is going way back to when Scott Layden was the GM, and then carried through with Kevin O'Connor and Dennis Lindsay, who were very process-oriented guys, and we would have all that stuff laid out and sorted out and talked about and argued about and debated about all the way up to the day before the draft, because we would want to have everything in line with what we want to try and do or what our different options would be going into draft day. So on draft day, we weren't debating, we weren't arguing, we weren't pointing fingers about, you said this, I thought we were going to go with that guy, why is this guy in the picture, whatever. You've got all that stuff that's already hashed out before. So now on draft day, you can calmly execute what your plan is, whether it's plan A, plan B, plan O, P, Q, whatever it is, and put that into action. And you've already thought those things through. So right now is the heavy lifting time for the personnel people. And now an added layer to it, Spence, this year is they bring in Austin Ainge at this critical time, and Austin Ainge is going to have certain ways that he organizes it, how he processes it, how he wants the flow of the information or of the evaluation and discussion process to go. So the guys who have been there and working on this stuff all year long, all of a sudden have a new boss, if you will, in the room saying, oh, yeah, we're not doing it like that anymore. Now we're going to do it this way. Oh, okay. And we've got, what have we got? We've got 15 days or 17 days or whatever till we do that. Okay. All right. And you've got to be able to, this is the shuck and jive time. So you got to be able to read and react and figure out how you're going to go about that business. So that's going to be tricky for them, because it's one thing to have a process in place, but then to have someone come in like in this and, proverbially and, the relief pitcher in the 8th inning, and now you got to go with what he's bringing to the table. That adds another wrinkle to it.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to go there next. And I don't know how Austin operates. I don't know what his personal ethos or way of going about this is. No clue. He's worked in Boston for 17 years, 14 in the front office, 3 as a G League coach. Certainly worked for his dad and then worked alongside Brad Stevens. So, 2 guys that are very well respected in an organization that has had a ton of success, including a recent championship, and maybe would have won it again if they could have stayed healthy this year. But what sort of dynamic, because you referenced the guys that have been over there doing the groundwork, scouting players, going to games. And it's, Smitty, it's not just that they brought Austin in. They bring him in, and Ryan said he's the guy calling the shots now.
Yep.
So what sort of complication or whatever you want to label it as does that bring to a group when you've been doing the work, and all of a sudden there's a guy that's not just been brought in as an addition to your staff, he's brought in and he's the boss. What he says goes.
No, that's a big deal, because now all year long you've been in a certain rhythm, you've had a certain schedule you've been following, you've been discussing with your group all along, what your goals, what you're pinpointing, what your evaluation points are as you go out to watch the college guys, as you go out to watch the G League guys for, potential add-ins during the summer. As free agents, what you're looking at overseas on the international market, all those things you're trying to put together, and you're trying to figure out where the different pieces lay and how do we structure this and who do we value. And your group has been having these discussions all along. So back in November, December, January, you've been having meetings. Hey, I just got off the road and I saw these 3 guys. Can we have a meeting tomorrow to discuss these guys? Come in, boom, boom, boom. Hey, Spence, you better get out next couple of weeks and see those 2 guys, because I think they're going to be in the mix for something, okay, whatever. So you got all of that organization, all of those moving parts going on, and you've had a certain rhythm, and you've had certain voices in the room who have been directing that action. And then all of a sudden, last week, the owner comes in and goes, oh, by the way, we got a new boss, and here he is, and everybody, good luck. And everybody's going, okay. And, and they know Austin Ainge, and they know, the guys know him to different levels, but, they know who he is and, respect who he, what he's bringing to the table. But we don't know what his, how he reacts. We don't know how he wants to organize things. We don't know if he wants to, start from A and go to Z, if he wants to start over in this area and organize it that way, or how he sees it. Because, look, he's been doing that stuff with the Celtics all year long.
Mm-hmm.
So he has a certain place in that process where his head is at and how he sees these guys. So he may come into a meeting the first day and go, hey, let's talk about, Jimmy Jones from so-and-so. And somebody goes, Jimmy Jones? We didn't scout him. He's not good enough. What do you mean he's not good? No, I've been watching him all year. You can have those kinds of discussions. And so now you're going, well, okay, we haven't talked about Jimmy Jones all year. And now this guy's coming in saying he's been following Jimmy Jones all year, and he's really a legitimate So you have those kinds of things that can come up. So you're trying to weed through all of that. And the guys who have been doing all that groundwork for you all year long, are now suddenly they're trying to reorganize their notes, their information, what they've set up as things that they thought were going to be important at this point in time in the process, and reconfiguring what those are based on what the boss is now saying. And so That's going to be the interesting part of that, because Austin Ainge is going to come in with his own set of guys and priorities and what he sees from afar. He's been watching the Jazz from afar, obviously with his dad. You know, he's pretty well acquainted with where the Jazz are at this juncture, and so, you know, he's got an opinion, I'm sure, about, hey, you guys really need A, B, and C, and the guys in the room are going, well, we know that, but we also need D, E, and F, and so what are we prioritizing? So those are big discussions. This is a tough time of the year, to do this. Not quite sure the impetus of that on the ownership level of why to do it, 3 weeks before the draft, but okay, that's what they did, and so now everybody in the room has to react to that and they go with the flow, and that part is going to be interesting, I think, in over there in their facility for the next 3 weeks.
So look, there's no other way around it. The Jazz need everything right now. They don't need a point guard. Yeah. They don't need a center. They need good players. Yeah. They need a lot of good players, because when you analyze the Jazz and juxtapose their current situation with the teams in pro basketball that are winning games right now, there's just a Grand Canyon gap when it comes to the talent on the floor. I don't know if you've landed on best case scenario at 5. If they stay at 5, just curious as to what sort of, if you want to throw names out there, go ahead and throw names, but just what sort of player should Jazz fans hope they walk away from the draft with coming up in just a few weeks?
Yeah, they as you say, Spence, they need everything. So what it's really going to come down to at the end of the day is how they judge, how they evaluate, and what they think is most important in terms of your somebody's skill level, their talent, their acumen for the game, and who is the best player that brings the best chance to have some kind of impact with the group that you have. If you end up staying at 5, you're going to have several options, whether an Ace Bailey, like the 6'8" kid who's a long wing, who's a mid-range scorer, erratic long-range shooter, but has some athleticism and may be able to play multiple positions in the NBA, whether there's someone like that you want to add to your group, or you think if he's good enough and can be, a guy like that, like, he's not as long as, but a Jaden McDaniels type guy to get out on the floor and be a 3-and-D type player. If you want a pure shooter or scorer, whether you like the kid from Baylor, the Edgecombe kid, or you like the Johnson kid from Texas, who's a little bit bigger. If you think you just need a pure shooter or a scorer, in that regard, if you think that's what you're going to need, I think there's a couple of intriguing players to me that they could be looking at that I think could be helpful in what they're trying to get toward and build. And ironically enough, they're both from Cooper Flagg's teammates from Duke. And I'm talking about the Con Knippel kid, who's a playmaker, who measured out at the combine shorter than people thought he was, 6'5", so he's going to play 6'6" in shoes. So he's going to be a guard, playmaker type guy, all-around guy. And then the other kid I really like as a prospect is his teammate, is the young big kid, Malawak. The kid from Africa,
from Duke,
who's measured 7'1" in bare feet on the combine, over 9 foot wingspan, 9 foot standing reach. Just really, I think he's a raw talent. But I think in this league and the way the game is going, someone like him who can move his body the way he can and can really disrupt the game defensively is the kind of guy that you could be looking at. To get a guy who is a unique type of player in his frame and in his athleticism for his size, that's a ways away. And again, you're not going to be winning next year. So do you want a guy like that who you value, who you think can come up and can improve the next several years and get someone like that going? If you did that, then you got to figure out what you're going to do with someone like a Walker Kessler, and if that's someone you move on from, in a trade scenario or sign and trade something because now again you're talking about what is our path to winning, how long is that going to take, and what is the money we're going to be spending to get there. So those are all the moving parts that you're trying to juggle, within the framework of the upcoming draft.
So when it comes to, and I'm not trying to make something out of nothing. I honestly don't know how this summer is going to play out in the landscape of the NBA. You hear a lot of people pontificating on the possibility of real movement from players that could make a big difference. And most off seasons, we see maybe one or two of those. I don't know how many we'll see, if we'll see any at all, but one of the teams that people continuously bring up, and they do have some decisions to make, are the Boston Celtics. They a new ownership group who was just informed that just for the right to have the team, you have to pay $500 million in luxury tax punitive penalties because of the way that the CBA is set up now. Danny, Austin, Will all spent time in Boston. Danny spent a long time in Boston. Austin comes to the Jazz straight from the Boston Celtics. What sort of, if any at all, synergies would exist in that scenario that if Boston's open to do business and the Jazz want to get involved here because of the familiarity, is that something Jazz fans can look at potentially as a positive?
Sure, yeah. The issue with the Celtics is that the new ownership group came in. They knew what the books were like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they didn't come in blind. So they knew they were going to be coming into a scenario where next year there's a potential, if they kept the team the way it is, currently constructed, that with salaries, taxes, penalties, second apron, repeater tax, all these levels of financial responsibility that you have toward your player salaries, they could be paying close to $500 million into that area. But that ownership group was willing to do that when they took over because they had the prospect that all of our guys are in place. They're all signed. We know they can win. We are hopeful they can win again. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're in the business for. That takes a major hit, when Jason Tatum goes down.
Yep.
And now he's out for probably most of next year. Okay, how does that affect the rest of their team competitively? What does that do to their real chances of winning? Because as a new ownership group, well, we might want to pay or willing to pay that kind of money in all those salaries and penalties, et cetera, if we really believe we have a legitimate chance to win. Mm-hmm. Okay, if we don't think we have a real chance to win, then why are we spending all that money? And so now the Jason Tatum injury comes into play. He's a major cog out of the lineup. We're not going to have him for most of next year, maybe all of next year. You never know how he's going to recover from that injury. But say in a worst-case scenario, he doesn't come back, we're going to be a good team still. But are we really a championship-level team? And if we don't think we are, but we can be competitive, how much do we want to still get into that money issue, or do we just back off it and say, okay, we got to take our lumps, we got a bad break, okay, maybe we have to retool and we have to do something else with the finances to reel that back in somewhat. And so that may be something where other teams, the Jazz for one, Phoenix another one, I don't know, other teams that have room. Brooklyn has a lot of room where the vultures might be circling the Boston Celtics and saying, hey, we'll be willing to talk to you about, Jaylen Brown, or we'll be willing to talk to you about Drew Holiday, or whoever it is, and that we think can help us. And, and then, of course, the Celtics have to want to play ball and have to, feel like, these are going to be moves that make sense business-wise because of this bad break we got with the Tatum injury. And nobody is going to know that better than Austin Ainge,
right?
Who was right on the front line with all of that. Mm-hmm. So the Jazz will have an inner track, not to necessarily getting a deal done or something like that, but at least information and knowledge-wise about how those owners are thinking, how the internal workings are going, what Brad Stevens is thinking, all these kinds of things that would play into it. And, of course, the relationship between the two when you get down to, maybe discussing stuff that's real or that you may want to be able to do, because the other thing that can come into play that can be helpful in these kinds of discussions is the fact that, you're out west and you're one of the worst teams. So you're not really going to affect us, the Boston Celtics, if we do a deal with you and you're not in our division.
Right.
You're not the Knicks. So we're trying to do business with you and feed our nearest competitors, so to speak. So that also can play a factor in those kinds of discussions. So that kind of stuff can come up. That's what we've talked about, Spence, all along, with this losing and tanking and whatever. That part of that process involves, being in the right place at the right time when something happens to somebody else and another team all of a sudden has to pivot off something, and you're standing there, with your hand up and going, hey, me over here, let's talk about something. So the Jazz are in that kind of position, and only time will tell how those kind of things may come about.
Before I set you loose, do you anticipate, so if we operate off the premise, and this is a dangerous assumption because nobody knows, but if Boston's open for business, if Giannis is okay with potentially looking to leave Milwaukee, if the Phoenix Suns have to move off of Durant, if all of this veteran star talent really is available, do you think the Jazz get involved? Everyone has latched on to Austin's comments last week where, in response to Sean's question about your personal theory or whatever when it comes to taking or manipulating minutes, and Austin said you won't see that this year. And as we discussed last week, that's all fine and good. You have a top 8 protected pick that you have to keep. You just do. If they win 35 games and Mark Tatum pulls the number 9 envelope out and says Utah Jazz, and they send a top 10 pick to the team that I think is about to win the world championship, it is a massive failure. So it's all fine and good to give lip service about, hey, great soundbite, way to go. They've got to hold on to that pick. And if they get involved with some sort of Jaylen Brown whatever deal, I don't know that I see that making sense for them.
Well, again, all those things are hypothetical, Spence. I would say just on the surface, when fans are looking at just what could happen in the coming weeks and during the summertime, Kevin Durant, Phoenix has to do something with him, in my opinion, because that's just not working. He's got 1 year left. He's going to want to go to somebody who can win A, but B, offer him a possible contract extension. But he doesn't control that. Phoenix has to be able to man up and say, this is what we're going to do for the best interest of the Phoenix Suns. And so whatever that ends up being, that's Kevin Durant, that's your problem.
Yep.
Okay. Giannis, a different deal. Giannis has several years left. Giannis is the good guy. Giannis is the guy you want in your organization. Giannis has not said that he wants to be traded. He has not made any kind of demand, and that's not going to be his nature. That's not his personality. What has come out and sometimes been misconstrued by the media is that Giannis has made it known that he's willing to discuss with the people who run the Milwaukee Bucks organization the idea of what makes sense to you as an organization and how does that affect me as a player. And if we mutually agree that it's better for you to move on from me because Dame Lillard is going to be out next year like Tatum, and he's going to be getting paid over $50 million to watch the games from the bench. And are we really going to be a serious competitive team? And if we're not, I'm the good soldier. I'll do whatever you guys want. But if it makes sense for you to move on from me and my big number, and I'm still in my prime, and you just have to recalibrate because, again, we got a bad break with the Damian Lillard injury, and so you want to move me, then I think that one would be more where Giannis would be, saying behind closed doors, hey, look, I'm willing to play ball, but don't send me somewhere where I can't win. Yeah. Because, I've been the good guy and, I brought a championship here and a couple MVPs and I think the Milwaukee organization would say, dude, we got you. we're going to get you to, whatever, the Lakers. So we're going to get you to OKC somehow or whatever it's going to be.
Right.
But that one would be a little bit different to me. I think Giannis would be able to dictate quietly and in good conscience, what he would want to do in that regard. But that's a tough deal for Milwaukee too, because they got to figure out that's a financial thing, and that's a real thing that you got to be honest with yourself, and that's a tough deal to hold when you're in that position and you didn't count on it, and here we are, and we gotta figure this thing out, but again, Spence, to the point earlier, that's why the Jazz put themselves in the position of not being a good team, of having all these draft picks, having all this freedom, if you will, to make and move and shuffle guys and whatnot. And they may be the guys who are waiting there on the sideline going, yeah, we're willing to talk to you. Yeah, we got a bunch of, what do you like? You like A, you like B, you like C, what do you like, and have the opportunity to get into that kind of discussion, and then you never know how things are going to roll. So.
Yeah, only time will tell. Should be a fascinating offseason. All right, my man, great to see you. We'll see you next week, right?
Yes, you got it. Thanks,
All
man.
right, the great Richard Smith. We'll catch a quick break. We're going to bring in Ted Robinson coming up. We'll do some college football, House v. NCAA settlement, and maybe a little Roland Garros French Open final conversation with Ted on the other side right here on ESPN 700. All right, Game 3, Stanley Cup Final. It is tonight at 6 o'clock when we say goodnight on the radio show. Florida-Edmonton, that series is deadlocked at a game apiece, as is the NBA Finals, which resumes on Wednesday. Our next guest, one of my favorites, we became familiar with each other during the Pac-12 Network days, which unfortunately are behind us, but the great Ted Robinson back on the drive on a Monday afternoon. Ted, happy Monday, sir. How are you?
Great, Spence. Thank you. You should have a quiz after we're done about how many people know what you just played, what Porter just played, more accurately.
I would hope that Simon and Garfunkel is recognized and unanimously respected, right?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, it's from a different generation. My gosh, I mean, it was my mother had to put up with all the teasing about that song when it first came out.
All right, Ted, what has your attention most these days? I mean, I would imagine you tuned in for a decent Grand Slam final for the French Open yesterday, but we've got NBA Finals, Stanley Cup, we've got golf, tennis. What's capturing your attention the most?
Well, obviously, Roland Garros was phenomenal ending, and it was unique for me. This was the first time since 1996 that I was not in Paris for Roland Garros, part of my new life as I'm turning a semi-retirement, and so that was a big part of it. And I'm just kind of floating around. I am a hockey fan, Spence. I started as a hockey announcer a long time ago. I was in Salt Lake City for the Golden Eagles at the Salt Palace.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 years I was in minor league hockey in other cities. But anyway, so I've been watching that. And I'm going to work the Washington State, Oregon State Pac-12 football games again this fall on CW. So that'll be the one thing that'll keep me occupied through the fall.
Okay. All right. Very nice. Very nice. We were talking about the French Open final a little bit earlier. And, I grew up in the Sampras Agassi American tennis era, which was a lot of fun to watch those two obviously achieve at a high level. My first question about this dynamic is there a reason that we haven't been able to develop great American male tennis players recently? Is it a different approach? Is it something where internationally there's more of a, emphasis on it? And look, you don't have to be an American for people to enjoy your game. But again, growing up when I did with these great tennis players, I just wonder your thoughts on why we don't seem to develop them the way we used to. Hello, Ted.
Yeah, I'll give you an answer that explains a lot of it, which is Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, and now Alcaraz and Sinner. I mean, we've had really good tennis players since the trio that you mentioned, which I broke in tennis in that era, and then I was able to really work the entire Federer, Nadal, Djokovic era when we had Andy Roddick, who actually was number one in the world for a bit. James Blake was a top 10 player. I believe Marty Fish was briefly in the top 10. And now we have a current group of really good American men. Francis Tiafoe, Taylor Fritz have been in the top 10. And I think Tommy Paul may have. But anyway, my point is, what they haven't yet done, with the exception of Roddick winning the one U.S. Open that he did in 2003, they haven't won a major. So I would say we're not hurting for talent. We haven't yet developed the guy that can take that last step to the mountaintop, which, by the way, we've had on the women's side. But as we've just seen, the first two majors of the year won by Madison Keys and Coco Gauff. So our women's tennis is terrific, and our men's tennis is very good. We just don't have that last step that someone yet to take to win a championship.
So, moving off of that dynamic, I just wanted to know, because when I saw you on the rundown, I was excited to ask you, Alcaraz, Sinner, 5.5 hours, fifth set tiebreak, a bunch of championship points overcome by both. Just what was that like for you to digest? It feels like there was something like historically significant about that moment in tennis. You know what I mean?
I think your last point there, Spence, is exactly right. And I was actually exchanging texts with John Wertheim, who's a friend and, of course, does a lot of 60 Minutes work. And now he's a longtime tennis writer and commentator. And I said, this to me was the next generation's 2008 Wimbledon, which I still believe is the greatest tennis match ever played. Federer, Nadal at Wimbledon, with Rafa winning 9-7 in the fifth. This was for the next generation, that match, and it confirmed that Sinner and Alcaraz are the two best. They had already established that going in. If you looked at, for those who are tennis nerds, you look at the rankings and you can see point totals. They had already established themselves as the top two in points. They've separated themselves from the field. To do it in a major final like that, with that kind of stage, that's what cements it in the minds of the general public. I'm referencing the American sport public. So to me, what that match did yesterday was confirmed these are the two, and everybody else is chasing them.
For sure. All right, moving off, and you reference you are a hockey fan, and we are a new hockey market with the Utah Hockey Club, now Utah Mammoth, just ending their first year of existence. It's been really fun to have NHL hockey here in Salt Lake. Obviously, I grew up going to MSG, watching the Rangers for years, still pull for the blue sweaters when I have the opportunity. But this has been a pretty interesting final so far. It's only 2 games. You have the speed and skill and grace and elegance of Edmonton and just the annoyance and bully physicality of Florida. These two teams obviously know each other, seeing each other in the final a year ago. What do you make of what we've seen through 2 games, and who do you like to lift Lord Stanley's Cup this year?
Yeah, I really, the other night may have been the savior for Florida. I'm not sure if Edmonton had been able to score in one of those. They had 2 really great overtime chances that I'm not sure Florida's coming back from 2-0. And now, of course, the squeeze is really on Edmonton. They have to win one of these 2 in Florida. But I think I'm going to say big picture here, Spence. I think it's fabulous for hockey. I have been a huge Edmonton fan for no reason other than they're a small market in Canada with the best player in the game. Gosh, that happened once upon a time, didn't it? And they won, and they won a bunch of Stanley Cups with that guy, but they couldn't keep him. They couldn't keep Gretzky, and that's what it kills a sport when that happens. And that's what I want so badly is for Edmonton to win this cup and make sure that Connor McDavid finishes his career in this city. He's the best player in the game, and it's the healthiest thing in the world for any professional league that player. It's exactly what I think is one of the big negatives to the NBA is that doesn't happen in the NBA. It needs to happen for hockey for Edmonton. So, the specifics are Florida's experience to me. A guy like Marchand who's been through these wars a million times, and you can just tell. And boy, he didn't look 37 scoring that winner the other night in the second overtime, did he? But I think that one was huge. I think that may tilt this series a little bit. I'm hoping Edmonton proves me wrong and wins one of these 2.
We were debating a dynamic a number of weeks ago about, where we're at as a market with the Jazz trying to figure their way through a rebuild without a lot of progress. It's been tough if there's a new president of basketball operations in town, Austin Ainge. Danny's son has been hired, and he's the main decision maker. And if we're honest, Ted, as I'm watching Oklahoma City, who's the best team in basketball and probably going to win the thing. I mean, due respect to the Pacers, who deserve a lot of credit for their grid. There's a Grand Canyon gap between where the Jazz find themselves now, year 4 after moving on from Gobert and Mitchell, and where the best teams in pro basketball are. And ironically enough, the hockey team, the Utah Mammoth, really find themselves, I think, in a good spot. I mean, a good young team with a lot of good talent and the number 4 pick in the draft because they moved up in the lottery. In 1 year, the Utah Mammoth have already had more luck than the Jazz have had in 50. Unfortunately, that's just kind of where we're at. But I don't know if I want to characterize the question like what's easier to win, a Stanley Cup or an NBA championship. But we've been debating about like what this market will see first and which front office will have more success in their endeavor of trying to build success. So just curious your thoughts on what it's like to try to build a basketball team juxtaposed to a hockey team in a place like Salt Lake.
That question today, Spence, I would say a Stanley Cup would come to Salt Lake faster than an NBA title. And it's just a structural problem that the NBA has to fix. And they're trying with all these caps and aprons and all this jargon nonsense that you hear talk about that fans don't care about, but of course are attempting to make sure there's still competitive balance in the league. But look at the standings this year. Just look at the standings. Look at what you referenced, and the Jazz were part of this. Look at the extraordinary canyon between the top teams, plural, and the bottom teams, plural. Not 1 or 2, but like 8, right? in the NBA that weren't competitive at all from day one. And it's all my years in baseball, I used to go through this, is that baseball for a period of time had it right in that maybe 3/4 of the teams on opening day, their fans thought they had a chance to be in the playoffs. And the money disparity since I said that, is out of whack in baseball, as the Dodgers are the poster team for. And so what baseball has tried to do to counteract that is just put more teams in the playoffs and have these one and done playoff games, et cetera. So the NBA, I think, has a major problem in, guys decide, like, what's Giannis going to do now? Giannis is McDavid, right? Giannis is Connor McDavid. Does he stay in Milwaukee where he already won a title? Does he stay in Milwaukee and let that team continue to, fill in the pieces around him, which is exactly what I'm seeing where I live. It's exactly what Steph Curry and the Warriors are doing, right? Steph Curry's staying put. He will finish his career here, and they're continuing to try to put the right pieces around him. Or is Giannis going to force him his way to say, I want to go play with player A and player B on this other super team? I think that's horrible. We've seen it happen. And it's, to me, a massive problem that is one of two that the NBA has, and the other one is 82 games. And we all see it. It's 82 games has no meaning anymore because nobody plays it. And, I read something, I forget who wrote this. Somebody wrote an interesting thing the other day or recently about the NBA. If you really want to do this, shorten the game to 40 minutes. Make it a college length game. Make it a 40-minute game. Hopefully that would eliminate the load management stuff and the fact that players play 3/4 of the games and coast through a bunch of others, and particularly the teams. I saw this with the Warriors out here, where they would play 20 extra playoff games a year, which anybody that's from being in postseason sport, a postseason game in any sport has 2 to 5x the intensity of a regular season game. So 20 postseason games in a year is probably the equivalent of playing 60 regular season. Well, you do that 3-4 years in a row, like the Warriors did, and suddenly you see guys starting to lose their legs. And that happened, I think, quite vividly to the Warriors the last 2 years. So anyway, to your question, I think the NHL and the Stanley Cup is a much more realistic proposition, given where your team played this year. Your team was in a playoff chase. They're respectable. And so, you hope with the fourth pick they find somebody that helps propel them. And the other thing I think we've seen the last couple of years in these sports is the keys get in the playoffs. Get in. And if you can get in, now you re-gear your game. And we're seeing that happen in the NBA. The veteran teams, the Lakers, the Warriors, that's what they're trying to do now. Just get in the playoffs. And then our guys can ramp up. We've saved some fuel in our tank, and we can give it a run.
Yeah, some really good stuff in there, Ted. And I'm always reminded this time of year how awesome basketball is when the best players just care about doing their job, right? So the nice thing that we get is we get March Madness. Obviously, the NCAA tournament is, in my opinion, the best sporting event we have on our calendar, and that dovetails into the NBA playoffs. So there is kind of like this 8 to 10 week period, maybe even a little bit more than that, of really high-level basketball when the best players in the world care about showing up and playing. But to your point, and I will never stop talking about this. I know I sound like the old guy yelling at a cloud. Like, I just will never be able to understand the way that this league and this sport has shifted and changed, where so many of the players don't give a rip about showing up and playing hard when it comes to January. And look, I know it's a long season. To your point, the 82-game schedule probably needs to be looked at, and I understand that I am hearkening back to a 90s NBA where people did care about playing 82. It mattered. You would have contractual, things that would kick in if you were able to play a certain amount of games. I know some contracts have that now. It's wild to me, Ted. It will continue to be wild to me that oftentimes here in Salt Lake, so Tom Haberstroh actually did a study, we're most adversely affected by star players that just don't even show up. They don't even make the trip, let alone show up and oftentimes sit on the bench. I don't know what to do about it. Maybe to your point, it's time to slash the schedule, and maybe that would help out. But it's wild to me what this league has turned into with the lack of emphasis on simply showing up and playing in a game that you're paid to play in during the regular season.
Embarrassment. And I fairly certain from everything I hear about people who do know him that Adam Silver knows it's such, but he just negotiated billions of dollars in television deals to kick in next year with TV partners that are not going to be interested in fewer games. So perhaps that slightly shorter game is a more realistic reach for down the line. But you're 100% right. When you're a season ticket holder at Utah in Salt Lake, and your player, this team comes to town once because the league insists on the barnstorming schedule. So everybody comes in once a year, and the Celtics come in, and if Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown don't play, you're feeling cheated. I will tell you this: it's going to date me, probably 30 years, and I had just moved back to the Bay Area with my family. My kids were young, and Jordan had just come back to the Bulls after his little vacation, so to speak. So Jordan comes back to the Bulls. They're coming to play the Warriors. The Warriors are terrible then. But I bought 4 tickets. I went to the Warriors. I bought 4 tickets, and I wanted my kids to see Michael Jordan play in person. I was the broadcaster for the Golden State Warriors. I was their broadcaster for 2 years. The second season was Jordan's rookie year. So I'd actually called a game Jordan played as a rookie, probably 2 games, I guess, that year. But I wanted my kids to see him. Well, we go to the game. Jordan plays like 22 minutes trotting up and down the floor. You know what I never bothered to look at? The night before the Bulls played in Sacramento. And when I looked at the schedule, I just looked at the Warriors schedule. I didn't look at the Bulls schedule. So they were playing the back end of back-to-back, and Jordan was an older player by then, and he trotted through 22 minutes, and it was, and I'm sitting there going, I paid for this, and I didn't get what I paid for.
Yeah,
and that's just disappointing. But the funny thing, you talk about what Tom referenced in his study about players and all that, and now I'm going to really sound like the slightly older guy than you, Spence, because as I said, for 2 years I was the voice of the Golden State Warriors as a young guy, and this was the 80s NBA, so we're going way back. But I'm saying we had 4 trips that each season, 4 trips that were 4 games in 5 nights, and those are the trips to the East and the Midwest. Now, back then, the league didn't have Charlotte or Miami or Orlando, Minnesota. Those teams weren't in the league yet. But we'd still go. You'd go 4 games in 5 nights. Now, by the way, this was all commercial travel. There was no charter planes back then.
Mm-hmm.
It was commercial travel. You pretty much stayed at airport Marriott's because you play the game at night, go to your hotel, sleep, and the next morning you had to be on the first flight. That was the league rule. To whichever city you were playing in that night, you had to be on the first commercial flight. So you knew, and unless you were back then the Lakers with Magic and Kareem, or the Celtics with Bird and Parrish and McHale, or the Sixers with Dr. J, you knew that 4th night you had no shot. You had no shot. Well, now today they don't do 4 and 5. They've limited the back-to-backs. Everybody's flying charter planes, staying in 4 Seasons hotels. I mean, it's still travel. I understand that. It's a million times better than it used to be. And I'll tell you a story very quickly here that involves Salt Lake City. That second season that I did the Warriors was the first year of the Los Angeles Clippers. And so the Warriors were playing a back-to-back one night at the Sports Arena in LA, which is where the Clippers played then. And then the second game was the Salt Palace against the Jazz. So we go to the airport the morning after the game in LA against the Clippers, and we get on Western Airlines flight from Los Angeles to Salt Lake City. We're boarding, and the NBA players all had the first-class seats, and I sat in like the second row of coach. And a voice called out to me from the back, "Hey, Ted." And I look back at the guy that I went to college with and was also in the minor leagues with in hockey. He was a player. And at that point, he was a defenseman for the Edmonton Oilers. I'm startled, and I had not paid any attention. Edmonton had been in L.A. They had played the Kings the night before at the Forum. This was back when you had all these separate buildings. It wasn't all the Staples Center. So the Oilers were flying. So I go back, I say hi to him, and I go, what are you doing? He goes, "We're flying home." I said, "We're going to Salt Lake City." "Oh, yeah, but this flight goes on to Calgary and then Edmonton, a 2-stop commercial flight for this NHL team." And the kicker is, my friend Donnie, he goes, "And by the way, have you met Wayne?" And he introduces me to Wayne Gretzky.
No way.
Who's sitting in a middle seat in coach white knuckling the armrest, and we're at the gate. We're at the gate, and it's well known Gretzky did not like flying.
Yeah.
But here's the greatest player. Here's the greatest player in his sport, and he's sitting in a middle row in coach on a 2-stop commercial flight.
Wow.
And I've got a bunch of slug NBA players on a losing team that have got all the first class seats. I mean, it's just so. When I hear stories of today's travel, to wrap this up, I can't. I have no tolerance for it.
For sure. For sure. Ted, before I set you loose, we waited longer than we thought we were going to, but that's what college athletics has done to all of us, and the NCAA's lack of leadership that you and I have discussed for years, has injured, I would say, the reputation of collegiate athletics in a way for some people that feels untenable. I still think Saturdays in the fall feel like Saturdays in the fall. Oregon State and Washington State fans might disagree, and obviously we've had so many changes, but we finally have the House v. NCAA settlement in front of us, and schools will now be able to pay players starting in July $20.5 million for the fiscal year. It lasts until next June. So we don't need to dig into the weeds here and, really discuss everything that this means, but now that we do have at least some guardrails and guidelines, I wonder what your reaction is and what you think this means for the world of collegiate athletics moving forward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll try to be short. A couple bullet points. The guardrails you just referenced at the end, Spence, that's what everybody in college sports is talking about. It's what has been needed for a long time. And finally, probably the loudest and most substantial voice of the commissioners is Greg Sankey of the SEC. He referenced that after playing golf with Trump. I think it was over this past weekend, that they want the government. Everybody in college sports wants the government to step in and put in guidelines. And the point being, federal guidelines would overrule the state, because each state has its own laws about money and NIL, et cetera. And the playing field can't be even if state laws are going to be the guardrails. So having said that, I think, in fact, I had a chance to I did a little swimming I got back to my swimming roots here this past spring. I did the NCAA swimming championships, and as a result, I met Greg Sankey for the first time, interviewed him for about 15 minutes. Smart man, spoke well, very clear to him about preserving the Olympic sports, which everybody in the Olympic sports world of the schools that I'm around is completely on they feel like there's a dark cloud hanging over their head. Let's just say that. And that this settlement is going to lead to this slow dissolving of Olympic sports, reducing many to club sports, reducing scholarships, reducing staffing. It's just, oddly, this swimmer that put his name on it, who's positioning himself as a little bit of a Rosa Parks, is actually his effort here may hurt his sport, because that's one of the sports that is, it's an Olympic feeder for us. My gosh, college swimming produces the vast majority of the United States Olympic swim team, which is dominant. Well, if we don't have college swimming at this high level, and it won't just be swimming, it'll be other sports that will affect the United States in the Summer Olympics, not the Winter Games, but in the Summer Games. That, I think, is a major problem. We know what's going to happen with football. We know what's going to happen for men's basketball. I assume women's basketball will be taken care of with this money as well. Where it goes from there, we'll wait and see. But at least it's a step. To me, it's a step in the right direction, because what this process needs, other than guardrails, is transparency.
Yep.
People need to know what's being paid. Is it legitimate? And just that simple point. So now then, the last point becomes this commission that's been formed with the executive who comes from Major League Baseball, that's been hired to run it, which is going to be basically the new version of NCAA enforcement. Will it really work? Will it be able to enforce? Or will it be, as we just saw once again, where major schools are abusing, doing anything they want to do, and the NCAA just punished Akron football. I mean, Jerry Tarkanian's upstairs laughing because he told us all this 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And the NCAA absurdly still does this. So if this body that has just been formed, if it is allowed to have teeth and actually enforce, this will be, again, towards at least allowing there to be a level playing field. And then the last point of it all, which has nothing to do with NIL, but it has to do with money, is will the CFP, will the college football playoff retain its strength, or will the SEC and the Big Ten either muscle their way into dominating the playoff structure or just going off and doing their own thing? I think that's the other large looming question for football.
Well said, Ted. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time on this Monday. And, of course, whenever you have time for us, we have time for you, sir. Be well, okay?
Hey, anytime, Spence. Good being with you. Thanks.
All right. The great Ted Robbins, he truly is a titan in our industry. He's done a little bit of everything. I could listen to Ted tell stories for years. Basketball, football, baseball, swimming, golf, tennis, you name it. At the highest of levels, too. Olympics, major championships, and was one of the main voices of the Pac-12 network. May that network rest in peace. We'll catch a break. We got 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. 5 o'clock hour of the program comes your way next on this Monday afternoon edition of The Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, and we are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, let's get it. Drive at 5 time Monday afternoon style, about 9 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock. Beautiful day outside. It is hot. Summer is here. June flexing its muscles today. It's about 92 and sunny here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. Happy Monday to you. Hope you had a great weekend or off to a good start to that work week, and we appreciate you making us a part of your day. We've had a fun show, a busy show. We got 1 hour left in the program before we say goodnight and turn it over to coverage of the Stanley Cup Final Game 3, Florida-Edmonton. This series is deadlocked at 1 game apiece. Both games have gone to overtime. Game 2 was a double overtime situation. So hoping for more fun hockey tonight. It really is such a great tournament. It is a grueling tournament if you've never been exposed to Stanley Cup playoff hockey. Fun time of year for that stuff, and kind of helps you understand what we could be in for if the Utah Mammoth are able to take a couple of steps in the right direction and maybe qualify for the postseason next year. Game 3 of the NBA Finals will come your way on Wednesday, and you can also hear that game on our radio station, as we are your home of both the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Finals. Of course, the Thunder were able to even things up at 1 game apiece at home last night with a pretty dominant 123-107 win. They were going back and forth early on. I don't know. Tyrese Halliburton just did not wake up until the fourth quarter. But ultimately, it was the brilliance of the reigning league MVP, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, just in so much control right now. He's elevated his game to the stratosphere of very rarefied air, and he knows exactly what he needs to do. There's no panic in this kid. 34 points, 8 assists, 4 steals, 11 of 21 from the floor. Yes, he got to the free throw line, and I know people complain about it, but that's a skill of his that over the years has been beneficial when it comes to players trying to win championships. So Shai becomes the first player in NBA history since Wilt Chamberlain to score 30-plus points in 9 straight home playoff games. Over the first 2 games of his NBA Finals experience, he has 72 points. That's the most all-time, breaking records held by Michael Jordan and Allen Iverson, obviously 2 of the best scorers ever to do it. So OKC certainly goes back to Indiana feeling better after going down 1-0, losing the first game at home to the Pacers. Gainsbridge Fieldhouse will be absolutely cooking. That should be a fun Game 3 environment. So from a local standpoint, not a super busy weekend, quite frankly. RSL was off. They'll be back in action Saturday against DC. Only 2 games this month for Real Salt Lake. We are high speed ahead to both the NBA draft and the NHL draft of local interest around here. Friday, right after we said goodnight, the House v. NCAA settlement was pushed over the finish line. A multi-billion-dollar legal settlement really changing collegiate athletics, so, of course, allowing schools to directly pay their athletes. We'll talk more about this throughout the course of the week. We'll get some good guests on to kind of break this down. Brian Seeley, who is a high-level executive in Major League Baseball, has been named CEO of the new enforcement organization called the College Sports Commission. So he is kind of now tasked with enforcement. His job will be to lead the team responsible for enforcement of the new rules around revenue sharing, third-party payments to players for NIL deals, and roster limits as well. All right, we'll get you ready for Game 3 of the NBA Finals coming up. We'll also talk some Jazz offseason. One of our favorites, Rob Perez, will stop by, Worldwide Wob, as he's known on the interwebs. I want to tell you about a new partner of ours here on the ESPN Sports Network, Outlaw Distilling. Outlaw Distillery, a homegrown, grain-to-glass, nitty-gritty whiskey, vodka, rum, and moonshine distillery right here in Salt Lake County. Outlaw Distillery, Utah-grown with so much history here of cowboys, outlaws, mining, and more. Outlaw has everything on the spirit spectrum, from their spiced rum, vanilla bean rum, Outlaw coffee rum, honey bourbon, barrel-proof whiskey, vodka, and moonshine. They have it all, and they're embracing the Outlaw name by being rebellious and making some very unique spirits that aren't being seen or created by any other distilleries in Utah. Happy to have them on board. If you want to take a sip of their spirits, you can either find their bottles in local liquor stores or book a tasting. If you tell them I sent you, they'll hook you up with shot glasses as a souvenir. It's about an hour and a half. You get a tour of their distillery, and you get to try some of their spirits. So get your tour and tasting booked today at outlawdistillery.com. They opened in 2015, 4th distillery in the great state of Utah, deeply rooted in Utah history and tradition. Even the name Outlaw is inspired by legendary characters such as Butch Cassidy and the Outlaw Trail, which served as a primary transportation route for many of the notorious Wild West outlaws. The vision for Outlaw Distillery is clear. Help show the world that some of the best spirits can come from one of the least expected places. That is right here in Utah. We'll catch a break. We'll bring in Rob Perez coming up on the other side of a Monday Drive right here on ESPN 700. All right, wrapping it up. Final segment of the program for a Monday edition of the show. Always good to have Monday in the rear view. Hope you're off to a great start to that work week and had an excellent weekend. Busy week ahead for us here on ESPN 700. Coming up on the other side, we got a little Stanley Cup final action. Game 3. Wednesday will be the NBA Finals making its return. You can hear that game right after we say goodnight. So we'll have a little hockey coming up on the other side. All right, Porter, before we say goodnight, a little personal news. Ready? Got some personal news to announce.
Okay. I love that.
Your boy over here is now officially an ordained minister.
Oh.
Yep.
Nice.
My little cousin Madison has asked me to conduct her wedding, officiate the entire thing. I am stunned at how easy this is to do. Like, I kind of put it off. I was like, that's going to kind of be a pain. And then the wedding's in a month, so I had to get it done. It took like 45 seconds and $40 this morning. And now your boy's officially an ordained minister to officiate weddings in the state of California.
I love that. I love that. You better get licensed in Utah. You could probably make some good money.
No one's going to hire me to do their weddings.
I think people would.
Wait, do you hire somebody to do? Don't you like ask a friend or your father or something?
Yeah, but if you're doing it, if you're offering it, I bet someone who listens to this show every day would love to have you officiate their wedding. If they don't have like someone off the top of their head.
How much should I charge for this moving forward?
A lot.
I'm
not going to a wedding for free.
You got to set the price high. You know what? Hit my DMs. If you want me to officiate your wedding, I'll do it for $25,000.
Oh, I'll do it for like $1,000.
Wait, I
maybe
just
less.
told you that we need to set this high.
I know, but I could have a market as well.
Yeah,
Your market's going to be higher.
But what if somebody is willing to pay
I'm not
you,
as famous or well known as you.
Okay, but what if somebody's willing to pay you $25,000? All you have to do is ask. You'll never know if you don't ask.
I'll do $25,000 too.
All right.
I'm a great bargainer.
Yeah, I can tell. I can tell that your negotiating skills are very sharp. No, for real, I was stunned at how quick this was. You don't even need a signature. You just have to fill out a form and send them $40, and they're like, congratulations.
Yeah, I think they just need to like verify that you're a real person.
Yeah.
And that you can like be essentially a witness to a marriage, and then sign a thing, and you're seems pretty easy.
Completely stunned that it was that easy, but there you go. So blessings upon my flock. Thanks for listening. As an ordained minister, I feel like I can say things like that from now on.
Yeah, I think you should lean into that.
Okay.
You should start wearing.
No,
I will start wearing like a ministry gown.
I'm not doing that.
Okay.
All right. Let's
No
get out of
fun.
here. Well, you know what? Let me look at the market. I've never shopped for such things. Coming up on the other side, it's Game 3, Stanley Cup Final, Oilers-Panthers. So stay tuned for that, Porter. What comes our way on a Tuesday edition of the show?
Yeah, on a Tuesday edition of the program, of course, we'll react to NHL, NBA Finals series as they continue on. Tim McMahon for your NBA Daily Assist. We'll check in with Brad Knight of the Pacers Post-Up. He was kind enough to adjust his schedule so that we could get Eddie Gill on today. Dave Fox will stop by, as he does on Tuesdays. And a big treat, Ian Eagle joins the program.
Nice. Love me some Iron Eagle. And, we'll hang out with Dave Fox, too, I guess. We'll say goodnight. Love you, Dave. Special thank you today to Rob Perez, Eddie Gill, Richard Smith, and Ted Robinson. If you miss any sound from the show today, go to the website, which is ESPN700sports.com. You can also download our mobile app and take us on the go. It's how I listen to our station. The ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store and the Google Play Store. And then for what we do in our space every afternoon for 4 hours, check out the podcast page. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. It's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments, give us all the stars. It actually helps. Reporter, I'm Spence, saying goodnight. Enjoy your Monday evening. Stanley Cup Final action comes your way. Coming up on the other side of a quick break right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN Radio Network.